Chapter 2098. Xianxia took a sip of tea but was in no hurry to speak. She had been invited, so there was no need for her to speak. Moreover, he was the one who had invited her over for a negotiation, so she naturally had to listen patiently to see what was the big deal. Apart from a few powerful figures in the Mu family and some powerful shareholders of Disheng Financial Group, there were also some elderly elders present. It was obvious that this was a Hongmen banquet. If it were anyone else, their legs would have trembled, and they would have even stuttered when speaking. However, Xianxia was not afraid at all. Since the Mu family had invited her, she did not have to worry about what they would do to her. On her way there, she gave Mu Yaja a call, but it was answered by Minyu. He told her that the chairman was in a meeting and could not take the call for the time being, so he asked her what was the matter. Xianxia smiled and said, "Tell him to go straight to the Mu residence after work. I'll wait for him there." Okay. It seemed that Mu Yaja still did not know about this. Was Mu Linfeng trying to bewitch her? However, she was not worried. Apart from some of the more senior elders present, there were also some unfamiliar but young faces. Xianxia immediately saw the young man sitting upright beside Mu Shumin. From his face, the man looked young and was in his 20s. From his facial features, she could vaguely make out some resemblance to Mu Yaja, especially his eyes and nose, which were very similar. Although they were not exactly the same, they were at least 50% similar. Speaking of which, genes were really interesting things. Although Mu Yichen's facial features were very similar to Mu Yaja's, the aura he exuded was not at all comparable to Mu Yaja's arrogant aura. Although he had outstanding looks and extraordinary heroic spirit, he was not inferior when compared to Mu Yaja. It was no wonder that Mu Yanqing had always been lackluster in the Mu family. Standing beside Mu Yaja, he could only serve as a foil. Or rather, he could not even be considered a foil. Since the last time he had a deep talk with Mu Shumin, Mu Yanqing had quickly gained Mu Linfeng's trust and approval. Mu Linfeng's request for him was very simple. It was not impossible for him to help him ascend to the position, but after that, whether it was the real power of Disheng Financial Group or the executive power of the Mu Corporation, all must be in his hands. As for him, on the surface, he had become the new patriarch of the Mu clan. But in reality, he was nothing more than a puppet. However, Mu Yanqing was happy to see it happen. In fact, compared to Mu Yaja, he was not that capable. He was just a facade. After becoming the head of the family, he did not have the confidence to guarantee that the Mu Corporation could surpass Mu Yaja under his management and become a more powerful business tyrant. However, since Mu Linfeng wanted to take back his real power, then he would hand it over to him. Why wouldn't he do it? At least, he was still the head of the family in name. Even if it was an empty shell, so what? He only needed to be responsible for enjoying the glory, wealth, and vanity that came with being the head of the family. That was enough. He could enjoy the power of being the head of the family and cast aside his responsibilities. How could there be such a good thing in the world? Chapter 2099. Just this title alone was enough for him to fight for it like a moth to a flame. However, Mu Linfeng had also given him a warning in advance. It didn't mean that he could become the family head immediately after agreeing to it. Mu Linfeng still thought highly of his capable nephew, Mu Yaja. Hence, he called Xianxia over to show her who was in charge. If Mu Yaja knew how to repent and was willing to give up this woman for the sake of the family head's position, then he might as well give him another chance. After all, an outstanding talent like Mu Yaja was hard to come by in the entire Mu family. Forcing him to give up his position was bound to take some risks. Now that he was old, he could no longer afford to waste such energy or take such a huge risk. Hence, he found Xianxia for one last negotiation, which could be considered a showdown between the two parties. At this thought, Mu Linfeng took a sip of tea and went straight to the point without exchanging pleasantries. "I hope that you can leave Yaja." Xianxia wasn't surprised by his straightforwardness. On the way here, she had already thought of countless possibilities, including this one. Unspoken narrowed her eyes but didn't reply immediately. Instead, she calmly waited to see what this old man had up his sleeve. Mu Linfeng was a little surprised that she could keep her composure. After a moment of doubt in his eyes, he spoke again. Miss Yun, no matter what condition you have, as long as it's not too overboard, we can agree to it. However, I want you to know that Yaxia is a very outstanding child. He was hand-picked from the many descendants of the Mu family to be able to become the family head. I don't think you know how much he has sacrificed to be able to sit in this position. I don't want to sacrifice my precious nephew's bright future because of you. First of all, I want you to understand that no matter what happens, the Mu family will never acknowledge you. There's no room for you to be the Mu family's young mistress. Don't even think that the Mu family's door will open for you one day. To put it bluntly, I don't think you're worthy of Yaxia. Not worthy? Unspoken found it very interesting and laughed. How am I not worthy? As soon as she finished speaking, the crowd immediately laughed mockingly. Mu Shumin, who was standing at the side, replied sarcastically, I'd like to ask you, in what way are you worthy of Yaxia? Marriage was decided by the parents and the matchmaker. The Mu family didn't have such an old-fashioned tradition. But no matter how bad it was, they still had to pay attention to the fact that the two families were of equal social status. Ask yourself honestly, are you worthy of our Yaxia? Unspoken didn't get angry. Instead, she smiled and didn't say anything. Unspoken could only think of one thing about Mu Linfeng. Prejudice and arrogance. These people from the Mu family had always looked at her through colored glasses. However, she had always been fearless. After all, she had chosen Mu Yaxia, so she had decided to bear the burden of worldly judgment. Therefore, even if these insults were harsh, she remained indifferent. There was no other reason. After all, which rational person would take others' prejudiced words to heart? Chapter 2100. Mu Linfeng pondered for a moment before he said slowly, We've already investigated your background. Your mother, Mu Qingcheng, was an adopted daughter that old master brought back to the Mu family. When she was young, she was a singer at the capital's nightclub. I heard that your biological father is from the Gong family. We acknowledge that, but don't think that you can climb up the social ladder just because you're from the Gong family. Moreover, you're just an illegitimate daughter. You've never been recognized by the Gong family, let alone be compatible with the Mu family. It's fine if you're not from the same family. The problem is that your background is dirty. If word gets out, you'll only become a laughing stock. The Mu family can't afford to lose face like this. A century-old family's reputation will be ruined because of someone like you. Unspoken sneered. You're wrong about one thing. I have nothing to do with the Gong family. Mu Linfeng raised his eyebrows in surprise. He had thought that this woman would covet power and wealth and use the Gong family's background to take advantage of it. However, not only did she not take advantage of it, but she was also eager to sever all ties with the Gong family. For a moment, he could not understand her. Unspoken did not know what he was thinking. She only asked coldly, also, what do you mean by dirty? What's wrong with my background? You gave birth at the age of 18. Mu Shumin snorted and continued, you're a girl who doesn't know how to keep yourself clean. You became a surrogate mother at the age of 18 for money. You got pregnant before marriage and gave birth to 2 children. Even if you did it because of the Mu family, what will people say if word gets out? The daughter-in-law of the Mu family was born a commoner and got pregnant before marriage. People will only look down on her. Moreover, the reason why you chose to be a surrogate was because of the generous remuneration. Think about it. If your employer wasn't the Mu family but someone else, you would have done it without hesitation. It's just a coincidence, but that's not an excuse for you. This was what Mu Shumin had been brooding over. What if the Mu family hadn't asked for a surrogate? If it was the Gu family or any other family, as long as they were willing to pay, she would agree without hesitation. The Mu family will never welcome a woman who only cares about money. However, there was another reason that she was most wary of. Mu Shumin continued, moreover, I suspect that your so-called surrogacy is just a ploy. In order to climb up the social ladder, you're playing hard to get. First, you're using the surrogacy method to hide the Mu family's flesh and blood. When the child grows up, she's delusional to think that she can marry into a rich family because of her son. This is something that the Mu family will never admit. The Mu family will acknowledge those two children, but it's impossible for you to step into our family. Mu Linfeng had already laid his cards on the table. The child could be recognized. In other words, as long as Yu was willing, she could enter the Mu family anytime and anywhere, change her name, and become a real member of the Mu family. She, on the other hand, would never be able to cross this threshold in her lifetime. Mu Linfeng had always been prejudiced against her. He thought that the reason why she was with Mu Yaxia was because she coveted his background as the head of the Mu family. Chapter 2101. This was a position that many women would fight for, but it was difficult for them to achieve. She had only relied on her two children. As a mother, her status was elevated because of her children. Yet, she had easily obtained this glorious title. How could these people be balanced? Yunshirsher clenched her fists tightly. She was enduring it. She wanted to know what kind of prejudice the Mu family had against her. She wanted to know what kind of colored glasses these people were using to observe her, figure her out, and criticize her silently. Seeing that she was not speaking, Mu Shumin thought that she was feeling guilty. He added fuel to the fire, let's not talk about other things. Just your current status, an actress? Huh. How many good people can there be in the entertainment industry today? Now, to put it nicely, you can say that you're an idol, a celebrity, or a queen. In ancient times, you'd be a lowly actress with no status at all. An actress wanting to enter a rich family is simply wishful thinking. When Mu Yanqing heard this, he frowned and couldn't help but ask, Auntie? She's an actress? Yes. Didn't she star in a movie not long ago? The box office was very high. Mu Yanqing shook his head and said sarcastically, she can't be an actress. The Mu family doesn't welcome actresses. How can any woman in the entertainment industry be clean? I heard that. The female celebrities in the entertainment industry, no matter how untainted and pure they looked on the surface, were actually unrestrained and unrestrained in private. No matter what status they have, as long as they offer a high enough price, they can sleep with them for a night. That's why they say that women in the entertainment industry are dirty. How clean can they be when they're in such a big vat of corruption? Exactly. Only those nouveau riches would marry a woman in the entertainment industry. Who knows how many tricks these women have gone through. Those nouveau riches think that marrying a famous celebrity can increase their family's reputation. They're not afraid of being laughed at if word gets out. Who knows, these nouveau riches might have become brothers-in-law after marrying a celebrity. This is also the reason why these people will never be able to integrate into the upper-class society. In fact, the real rich don't care about actresses at all. It was only more than 10 years ago that such a trend took place. Nowadays, we still have to pay attention to matching families. Women have to be virtuous, gentle, virtuous, and knowledgeable. The Mu family doesn't need to talk about being well-matched in terms of social status. After all, strictly speaking, there aren't any families in the capital who can match up to the Mu family in terms of social status. I still hope that Yaxia can find someone with a good family background. She doesn't need to be rich. Even if she's from a scholarly family, marrying a lady from a prestigious family would be a good choice. Exactly. Yaxia is such an outstanding child, how can he be ruined by such an ill-intentioned lady? There was a burst of whispering. Yunshirsher sat expressionlessly in her seat as she listened to those harsh words. Those disdainful looks were like sharp knives landing on her body, piercing her skin. Vicious words hurt the cold of June. These words were not false at all. Xianxia narrowed her eyes and the corners of her lips curled up slightly. She moved slightly and sat up a little straighter. The moment she moved, everyone's eyes immediately focused on her. Xianxia scanned her surroundings and casually said, "I think you all have misunderstood something." Mu Linfeng was stunned. "What do you mean?" Chapter 2102. Mu Linfeng was taken aback, unable to make sense of her. Xianxia suddenly raised her head. With a pair of resolute eyes, she stood up abruptly and walked toward Mu Linfeng. She stopped 3 meters away from him. Her gaze was indifferent as she said coldly, "Mr. Mu, allow me to be frank. Even if you beg me to enter the Mu family, I may not be willing to do so." Xianxia's back was straight. Her chin was slightly raised, but she did not appear arrogant. Her posture was like a lotus in the mud, not allowing anyone to blaspheme her. "From the moment you opened your mouth, you seem to have determined that I'm a beggar. You seem to think that your nephew and I are together with you only because of his background and wealth. Uncle Mu, you must be joking. Since you said that I'm a scheming woman, then if I'm really so shrewd and ambitious, I can say that none of you can stop me if I want to enter this place." Xianxia paused and swept a glance at the astonished crowd. Then, she slowly said, "But I don't care even if you beg me to enter this place. Do you think that I covet the Mu family's wealth? I'm sorry. I really don't care for it. Sour grapes when you can't eat them." Mu Shumin jabbed. Clearly, he was infuriated by her words. "This person, your words are too extreme. That's not good, is it?" Xianxia turned to look at her and said sarcastically, "A narrow-minded person will be biased no matter what she sees. In other words, a person with a dark mind will not see any good in anything no matter how beautiful it is. Yaja is the person I love deeply. I chose to be with him because of him, and it has nothing to do with anything else. If you insist on judging me like this, I can't do anything about it. After all, summer insects can't talk about ice. You keep belittling actors and celebrities, but I feel that your qualities may not be comparable to those celebrities. At the very least, they rely on their own abilities to make a living in the entertainment industry. Even if some people use unspoken rules to gain fame, isn't it still a matter of one willing to be beaten and the other willing to be beaten? At the very least, whether it's mentally or physically, they have paid the price to get to where they are today. What about you? You're just blessed by the heavens. You're born a little better, but you don't have to be so arrogant and humiliate others, do you? Forgive me for being blunt, but you're, at most, lucky sperm. What else can you bring except for your reincarnation? In other words, I still think that you people are like beggars. You don't have any real ability, but you are the parasites of the family. Ask yourselves, when you're pointing fingers at others, at the same time, have you contributed to the family?" Her words were truly shocking. "What do you mean lucky sperm? What do you mean, parasites? Listen, listen. How of the Mu Abto you to say such unconventional words to? That was to of Mu to of him. Of course Mu of course, of that of Yun of her, to." Chapter 2103. Mu Shumin's chest was filled with anger. She glared at her fiercely and sneered, what shame could she have? A woman who uses her body to get money, what shame can she have? Xianxia narrowed her eyes, but she was not afraid. Instead, she mocked, "Please don't use my surrogacy as a moral blackmail. First, I didn't steal, second, I didn't rob, and third, I didn't interfere in the family. I only used my body as the price in exchange for the reward I won. I don't think that this is shameful. What's shameful is that everyone here casually slandered others because of power." She clenched her fists and trembled all over as she said this. This matter had always been a scar on her heart. Every time it was mentioned, it was undoubtedly unraveling that layer of scab and rubbing salt on the wound. For a long time, the wound had already festered and festered. But now, she did not care at all. She might as well tear the scar open and let the pus flow out. This way, it would have a chance to heal again. You. Mu Shumin was unable to restrain her anger. She suddenly stood up and pointed at her angrily. Ridiculous. Woman, you're simply absurd and unreasonable. Yunshurshu retorted, you're the ones who are unreasonable. Mu Linfeng slammed the table and said angrily, all of you, shut up. For a moment, the main hall was silent. Everyone kept quiet and did not say a word. Mu Linfeng turned his head and looked at her thoughtfully. Suddenly, he said slowly, Yunshurshu, I invited you here not to listen to your nonsense. Everyone's fate is determined by the heavens. There's nothing wrong with this. But the continuation of a family is not determined by fate. In this family, there are indeed vermin like you said, and there are also people who fail to live up to expectations. But you have to remember one thing. Not everyone in the family is useless. If they didn't do anything, a family like the Mu family wouldn't have been able to prosper for 100 years. The reason why the Mu family has been strong for 100 years at least shows that there are still many capable people in the family. This is not something that you can casually judge. I'm not the one who's making such presumptuous judgments. Yunshurshu interrupted him. Compared to the man's fury, she was exceptionally calm. Her serene expression was like the surface of a lake, there was not the slightest ripple in it. She was calm and composed. Have you forgotten? Just now, who was the one who kept saying that he was judging others with a prejudiced mindset? Oh, only the officials are allowed to set fires, but the common people are not allowed to light lamps? Just because you think you're superior, you feel that everyone here is superior to me. No matter what you say about me, I have to accept it, but I can't judge you. From what I see, you guys are clearly taking advantage of your seniority and disrespecting your elders. Don't think that just because you are an elder, you can criticize and humiliate your juniors without any scruples. In this world, what matters is reason, not seniority. You guys are the ones who are being unreasonable. Girl, you really have a sharp tongue. Mu Shumin could not hold it in any longer and scolded angrily. He didn't know why she was so talkative. Chapter 2104. I'm just being reasonable and stating the facts. You guys have no basis at all, and you're just using the fact that you have a sharp tongue. In my opinion, no matter how wealthy a family is, there's no lack of uncultured scum. If you ask me, I don't know where your sense of superiority comes from. In terms of upbringing and etiquette, the Mu family gives me the feeling that they're just putting on a show. The Mu family has indeed prospered for 100 years and can be considered a prestigious aristocrat. However, wealth has been passed down for 100 years, but other things can't be, right? You guys have thrown away all the rules and etiquette of the elder ancestor. What's left behind are just old dregs. As the saying goes, don't do unto others what you don't want done unto you. How can you restrain others when you can't do it yourselves? Don't you think this is ridiculous? If you want others to respect you, you have to respect others first. Don't you understand such basic upbringing? Yunshurshu's tone was calm and even. She had the aura of a scholar who had a verbal battle with a group of scholars. There were so many people present, but none of them could stand up to refute her. However, they were all furious. This little girl's mouth was so sharp. In just a few words, she had ridiculed them. The problem was that they didn't know how to refute her. Every word she said was sharp and incisive. Although it didn't sound pleasing to the ears, it was all reasonable and they couldn't refute it. Mu Shumin was infuriated by her. Yunshurshu didn't have stage fright at all. She met her gaze with an icy gaze. Seeing that he couldn't win against her, Mu Shumin turned to Mu Linfeng and said, "Second brother, where does this little girl get so much nonsense from? Don't waste your breath on her. Just give her an ultimatum. I think she's refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit." Mu Linfeng tried to restrain himself. His entire body was tense, especially the muscles on his face. They were so stiff that he couldn't look straight at her. Even the corners of his lips were twitching non-stop. He kept reminding himself to maintain his poise. He couldn't let this unreasonable junior see him as a joke. He suppressed his anger and said calmly, "I don't care about that now, but Unspoken, I just want you to know one thing. If you still love him, let me give you a word of advice." He let go in time. "I don't want to harm myself and him." "I don't understand what you're saying." Unspoken smiled elegantly and asked, "What do you mean by that? Just say it. There's no need to beat around the bush. I'm just a boor, so I can't understand your profound language." Mu Linfeng sneered. "I'll give you a sum of money. As for the amount, it's entirely up to you. However, there's a condition: you must divorce Yaxia and not cause any trouble for the custody of the 2 children." As soon as he finished speaking, Unspoken was stunned for a moment. Suddenly, she found it inexplicably interesting and laughed. "What are you laughing at?" Mu Shumin flew into a rage out of humiliation. "We're talking about a serious matter with you. Why are you laughing for no reason? Give me a sum of money?" Unspoken deliberated over this sentence, her eyes filled with mockery. "Can I decide the amount of money myself?" Seeing that she seemed to have taken the bait, Mu Linfeng was delighted. He immediately struck while the iron was hot and encouraged, "Of course. As long as you agree to my condition, I'll give you a check. You can fill in the amount yourself." Chapter 2105. "You seem to be very generous, huh? You're giving me a sum of money so casually. It's no wonder people say that the Muse are rich and overbearing. From what I see now, it does make some sense." Unspoken suddenly sneered, and her tone took a sharp turn to be cold and refreshing. "But I never knew that a person's dignity can be clearly priced with money." Mu Shumin sneered coldly. Thinking that Unspoken was pretending to be reserved, he pretended to be kind and advised, "Actually, at this point, you don't have to be hypocritical with us anymore. Unspoken, don't put yourself on such a high pedestal like a white lotus. Who in this world doesn't love money? If you don't love money, why do you have to work so hard in the entertainment industry? Since second brother has promised to give you a sum of money, you can name a number. As long as it's within a reasonable range, we won't go back on our word. With this sum of money, do you still need to act? You just need to enjoy life to the fullest. From your point of view, let me give you a piece of advice: you're still young, and there are so many good men in the world. Why must you insist on pursuing our Yaxia?" Without mentioning anything else, Mu Shumin's persuasion was indeed very tempting. This reminded Unspoken of something. Mu Shi had once told her about a female singer group in Taiwan. One of the members dated the son of a gambling king for 2 years and was considered half a step into the rich family. However, their relationship was opposed by the entire family. Just as their relationship was being disrupted, the girl found out that she was pregnant, so she told her rich boyfriend about it. Her boyfriend listened to his mother's advice and told her that the child must be aborted. Even if the child was born, the family would not approve of it. However, the girl insisted on having her way. She was certain that as long as she gave birth to the child, even if it was for the sake of the child, it would definitely help her enter the rich family. She went abroad, secretly prepared for pregnancy, and gave birth to a girl. Just as she was harboring the beautiful dream of marrying into a rich family, her boyfriend's mother appeared. After dating for so long, this was the first time she had seen her boyfriend's mother. She was an arrogant lady. Although she was the 4th concubine of the family, she had been manipulating the family for so many years and had long since slapped the entire family. She had made it clear that no matter what tricks she used, she could forget about taking a single step into the family. However, since the child had already been born, the family would acknowledge the child and place the child in England to be raised. However, she had to break up with her son immediately. As compensation, she promised the girl a sky-high sum of hush money. Although this girl loved this man deeply, she was also disheartened by his heartlessness, so she agreed to this condition. Therefore, with her ability, it would be difficult for her to go against this family. This fourth aunt was too ruthless. She would threaten and bribe her. If she played any tricks, she would be directly banned without any mercy. Receiving this sky-high hush money wasn't too bad of a deal, so she gladly agreed. This seemed to be the method that the rich were good at. No matter what kind of woman, giving her a sum of money would solve all her problems. However, it was different for her. Chapter 2106. Yu and Xiao Yichen could not live without her. She, too, could not live without this child. She knew that she was as insignificant as an ant if she were to go against the Mu family with her own strength. However, she was not afraid even if she had to pay the price. Yunshishi's lips curled into a smile. Suddenly, she found it hilarious and laughed out loud. "What are you laughing at?" "I'm laughing at your naivety." Yunshishi seemed to want to provoke them on purpose. "Hence," she said airily, "do you think I'm interested in this little bit of money? You seem to be underestimating me." "I'm sorry, but I don't agree to this condition." "You don't agree?" Mu Shumin's voice suddenly became louder. "Yunshishi, must you be so selfish? Even if Yaja loses his position as the Mu family's head because of you, will you be satisfied with that? When that time comes, there'll be no room for regret. Why don't we each take a step back while we still have some feelings for each other?" "What do you mean by that?" Yunshishi, who was sensitive enough to detect the peculiarity in this matter, raised a brow. In fact, everyone in the Mu family is very disappointed with Yaja. We really can't figure out why he would reject a girl from a prestigious family and choose you instead. Moreover, it's really hard for us to understand that he got a marriage certificate with you behind our backs. We've unanimously decided that if this child is still stubborn and insists on marrying you, then we'll reconsider and choose a new candidate for the head of the family. Yunshishi was stunned. Her eyes slowly narrowed, and at the end of her line of sight were hateful faces. Mu Yancheng, in particular, was smiling so smugly that the ambition in his eyes could not be concealed at all. Yunshishi suddenly understood Mu Linfeng's intention in inviting her for a negotiation. Their ultimate goal was nothing more than to force her to abdicate. If she decided not to do as they wished, they would strip Mu Yaja of his position as the head of the family. They thought that if she truly loved this man, she would definitely let him go for his future. "If I don't leave him, you will force him to abdicate. Is that what you mean?" Yunshishi asked coldly. "Huh. Little girl, your mouth is a little fierce, but at least you're smart." Mu Shumin snorted coldly, "Say it. Tell us your decision." "Interesting. Don't you think it's inappropriate for you to ask me this question?" Yunshishi glanced at her coldly. "Why don't you ask him directly? Isn't that more appropriate?" Mu Shumin had lost all her patience. She suddenly called her assistant over and asked for a checkbook. She picked up a pen and asked directly, "How much do you want? How much money do you want before you are willing to leave him?" Mu Shumin did not want to play games with her and asked directly. Yunshishi gritted her teeth. Mu Shumin hated her stubbornness and was determined to humiliate her in the most humiliating way possible. 100 million. Is that enough? "Madam, 100 million. Mu Shumin did not have the patience to listen to her and continued to raise the price. Before Yunshishi could reply, a childish and cold child's voice was suddenly heard from the door. 100 million? Are you trying to dismiss a beggar? There was no emotion in the voice. It was a childish voice, but more than that, it was cold and heartless. Everyone was shocked and looked in the direction of the voice. Chapter 2107. Yu and Xiao Yichen had appeared at the door unknowingly. Behind them stood two men in black suits with stern expressions. Yu was dressed in a black trench coat with his hands in his pockets. His expression was as cold as ice. Xiao Yichen stood at the side with an equally furious expression. He clenched his fists tightly and glared at Mu Shumin with a terrifying gaze. Mu Yichen, do you still know how to return to the Mu family? Mu Shumin snorted and taunted him. I thought you've forgotten your place and acknowledged a thief as your mother. Since you're all here, have a seat. Mu Linfeng waved his hand and ordered. The servant immediately brought 2 stools over and said gently, Young masters, please have a seat. Mu Yichen remained indifferent and unfathomable. The servant observed his expression. It was obvious that she had confused Xiao Yichen and Yu Yu. She walked to Yu Yu and reached out to carry him to his seat. However, Yu Yu slapped her hand away violently. Smack! Don't touch me. It's dirty. The servant was forced to retreat to the side. Yu Yu lowered his gaze and glanced at the chair beside him before kicking it away expressionlessly. With a bang, the little guy's strength was incomparably terrifying under his rage, and he directly kicked over the chair that was as tall as him. Mu Linfeng was stunned for a moment before he was infuriated. He straightened his body and stared at the little fellow who was standing not far away from him in disbelief. He was clearly so small, but he seemed to be hiding an endless amount of energy. There was an ancient saying that went, a newborn calf is not afraid of a tiger. However, how was this child a newborn calf? He was clearly the king of beasts. He was like a newborn tiger cub. Even in such a big scene, he did not show any fear at all. Yunshursher was also stunned. She had never seen such a terrifying Yu Yu before. In her impression, Yu Yu was a little more mature than the other children and was unusually steady. However, in front of her, he was always as gentle as water, like a refined little gentleman with an elegant temperament. But now, there was a different aura on his body. It was a very dangerous and aggressive aura. He stood there without saying a word, but his terrifying aura didn't seem to lose in the slightest even when facing off against a seasoned figure like Mu Linfeng. Since you've put it this way, I have no intention of negotiating with you calmly. Yu Yu turned around gracefully and laughed disdainfully. If it weren't for Daddy's painstaking efforts over the years, I would have destroyed Mu Group long ago. Yunshursher widened her eyes. It was hard to imagine that such arrogant words came from Yu Yu's little mouth, who only knew how to sweet-talk her. In her memory, Yu Yu's gentle smile and bright eyes looked at her as if they could speak. His little mouth opened and closed as if he could speak. Mommy, I want a hug. However, the image gradually shattered. She snapped out of her thoughts and saw Yu Yu's cold and hostile gaze. It was so real. Chapter 2108. Yu Yu, on the other hand, smirked mockingly. Old uncle, I see that you're getting on in years, so I have to remind you that I don't have the time to play house with you. Let's cut the crap and get straight to the point. Yu Yu, Yunshursher was frightened out of her wits as she softly called out his name from the side. This child, what was going on? How did he follow her here? How did he know that she was at the Mu residence? Moreover, the moment he appeared, he exuded an imposing aura that was completely different from his usual self. The series of suspicions left her in a daze. It was only now that she regained her senses. Who would have thought that this child would dare to challenge Mu Linfeng? How daring! Yunshursher knew very well that the little lad was defending her, but this was clearly not the time for that. The child was insensible, so she naturally had to stop him. She was afraid that trouble would come from his careless words, so she called out to him softly. This was not the way to protect one's shortcomings. Sooner or later, he would get into trouble. Yu Yu turned and glanced at her. He walked to her side obediently and placed his little hand gently on her shoulder. His gaze instantly became as gentle as water. What's wrong, Mommy? What's wrong? His voice was so gentle that it could be squeezed out of it. Standing in front of her, he seemed to have returned to his usual docile self. He was as obedient as a puppy, wagging his little tail at her. What nonsense are you talking about, Yun Shishir did not know whether to laugh or cry. She could not help but chide him. How did you follow me here? Agent Li brought me here. Agent Li? Yun Shishir's face was full of question marks. She clearly did not know what was going on. Li Hanlin walked over and bent over slightly with a smile. Hello, it's me. Do you still remember me? Principal? Yun Shishir felt that the world had turned into a fantasy. What's going on? It's a long story. President Yun will explain it to you personally later. Li Hanlin comforted her. Yun Shishir, on the other hand, was confused. Her thoughts were in a mess, and she only felt that the world was too chaotic. What was going on? Mommy, don't worry. I won't mess around, at least for your sake. However, there's a limit to everything. Yu slowly turned around to face his uncle. His eyes were as cold as ice. According to seniority, I should respectfully address you as second granduncle, shouldn't I? Before he could finish his words, he was quickly interrupted. Humph. Child, you have no respect for your elders. You have no right to call me that. Mu Linfeng was clearly infuriated, so his tone was naturally unpleasant. Mu Linfeng. Yu addressed him by name. Mu Linfeng's eyes widened in shock. Before he could react, he heard the boy casually say, "You'd better pray that Daddy can secure his position as the family head. When the Mu family's power changes, if you insist on forcing me to abdicate, Daddy will be dead. The day Daddy abdicates will be the day the Mu family welcomes the end of the world." He had long been unhappy with the Mu family. If not for the fact that the Mu family was his father's painstaking effort over the years, he would have taken action long ago. These good-for-nothings from the Mu family were like frogs at the bottom of a well. Did they think that the Mu family's position in the capital was unshakable? Interesting. He did not mind using his actions to broaden their horizons. Chapter 2109. He had lived for half a century, but he had never seen such an arrogant child. However, this child was insensible. Did he know how to deal with it? Naturally, Mu Linfeng did not take him seriously. Suddenly, a servant's voice was heard from outside the door. Young Master Yaja is back. Before she could finish her words, the person was already there. After Mu Yaja's meeting, Minyu informed him that Yun Shishir had called and asked him to return to the Mu residence as soon as possible after finishing his work. He was worried that something had happened and left a mess behind, so he rushed back after the meeting. Just as he stepped into the main hall, he saw a rather spectacular scene. With just a glance, he roughly knew what was going on. This was especially so when he saw Mu Yanqing's impatient and ambitious expression. It was obvious that he had secretly joined forces with Mu Shumin to hold a family meeting and was determined to start a bloodbath. He had long expected that Mu Yanqing would join forces with Mu Shumin to force him to abdicate, so he was already mentally prepared for it. He did not expect that Mu Yanqing would be so impatient as to gather all the elders in the family and wait for his arrival. The show would officially begin. Daddy! When Xiao Yichen saw him, the coldness on his face disappeared in an instant, and he happily welcomed him. Mu Yaja carried him and walked to Yun Shishir's side. With a smile on his face, he lowered his head and gently placed his large palm on her shoulder. However, such a small action instantly soothed all her uneasiness. His appearance was like the descent of a god, instantly wiping away all the worries and nervousness in her heart. Before this, even though she looked strong and forbearing, in reality, she felt isolated and helpless. A few minutes ago, Yu had also done the same to Mu Yaja. The father and son seemed to have telepathy. Even their small actions of comforting others were the same, and they had great chemistry. Yun Shishir laughed inwardly, finding the tacit understanding between the father and son very interesting. "How long have you been here?" he asked. "Not long, not long." She whispered to him, "I'm fine. Don't worry." With the tacit understanding between them, there was no need for words. Even if it was just a look, they would immediately understand each other. Xianxia took Xiao Yichen and held him in her arms. Mu Yaja turned around and looked at the crowd with an expressionless face. The corners of his mouth curved into a cold arc. Since everyone is here, why don't we lay everything out on the table? Mu Shumin quietly hinted. With Mu Yaja as the center, everyone took their seats one by one, forming a large semicircle around him as if they were having a scolding session. Mu Linfeng sucked in a deep breath of cold air. For a moment, Yu Yu's arrival had stirred up his originally calm state of mind. He opened his eyes and said casually, "Yaja, since you're here, there are some things that I should talk to you about. What do you plan to do with this woman?" He did not specifically specify, but everyone knew who this woman was referring to. Everyone looked at Xianxia. Mu Yaja glanced at her and turned his head away. I thought everyone understood what I meant. Chapter 21:10. Mu Yaja sneered and retorted, "Why do I need your approval for the woman I've set my mind on?" What a joke. Mu Shumin was at a loss for words. Even though he was used to Mu Yaja's arrogant attitude, he was still deeply dissatisfied and frustrated. Yaja, you're not young anymore. As a man, no matter how promiscuous you are outside, the woman you bring into the family should at least be from a reputable family, even if she doesn't come from a well-matched family. I heard that this woman is in the entertainment industry, and she's obviously a femme fatale. I heard that you've offended many people and made many enemies because of her. With your status, you're destined to stand at the top of the Mu family. You can't mess around like this. You must know that this is a very dangerous thing for you. As the head of the Mu family, you should be thinking about how to strengthen the family and not make enemies for it. This is very detrimental to the family's future development. Haven't you considered this point? Ever since you became the head of the family, you've become more and more mischievous. You don't consider the consequences of your actions. This is a little too much. We've heard that you deliberately suppressed other families and banned those celebrities for this woman. But, if you offend other families for such a scourge, don't you feel ashamed for the Mu family? Yaja, this child, has been rather negligent and lazy in the company's affairs recently. I heard that some time ago, there was an engagement ceremony on the island, and it was quite a big event. She didn't know where the capital for this engagement came from. Could it be that he secretly transferred it from the company's account? The Mu family's current situation is very unfavorable. If you continue to mess around, you'll only plunge the Mu group into deep trouble. Although you've brought considerable results to the Mu group all these years, why don't you think about it? If you continue to be stubborn and neglect the company's development, you'll cast aside the family's interests. How can you do that? As soon as one person finished speaking, the other continued. As if they had agreed on this beforehand, they fought to criticize his crimes. Mu Yancheng, who was listening at the side, was both excited and gloating. He did not say a word throughout, but the smug look on his face was incomparably dazzling. Since you became the head of the family, you have indeed done many things inappropriately. If you insist on marrying this woman, then according to what the elders have said, everyone agrees that you are not suitable to sit in this position. In the end, Mu Linfeng concluded. Everyone's gazes fell on him. Mu Yaja didn't say a word and just listened silently. Even in the face of everyone's accusations, he didn't refute them. It was hard for him not to find it hard to believe. After Mu Linfeng's last sentence, he smirked mockingly and retorted, "You've made such a big scene just to force me to abdicate." Everyone was dead silent, not a sound could be heard. Mu Yancheng looked around. Just as he was feeling incomparably excited, he accidentally met Mu Yaja's cold and scrutinizing gaze. He shuddered and immediately sat down obediently, intimidated by the latter's scrutinizing gaze. This man exuded an extraordinary and terrifying aura. He was full of deterrence and dignity. Chapter 21:11. One of them said slowly, "We have no intention of forcing you to give up your position. The position of the head of the household is supposed to be held by an outstanding member of the family. We chose you because we valued your talent and ability. Second brother has always thought highly of you and thought that you were outstanding enough. Everyone has always agreed that you are qualified for this position. However, the series of events that happened after that changed our view of you. We originally wanted to dispel our support for you. However, in just one night, we don't know what methods you used to obtain the position of the head of the household. Old master is old, so it's inevitable for him to be muddle-headed. However, we will accept this muddle-headed debt for the time being. It's just that you have really disappointed everyone in the family for so long. After considering all of the above, if you continue to be stubborn, don't blame us for being heartless. You want me to give up my position? Huh, what a stubborn word. Wuxia stood up gracefully with both hands in his trouser pockets. His posture was tall and straight, and his noble aura was dazzling. His gaze swept around lightly and he asked casually, "Then, who is the candidate to replace me?" Suddenly, his gaze fell on Mu Yancheng, and the corners of his lips curled up. Mu Yancheng? Brother, Mu Yancheng felt uncomfortable under his sharp and threatening gaze. Naturally, he couldn't reveal his ambition in front of everyone, so he could only pretend to be kind and persuade him hypocritically. Brother, are you trying to kill me by saying that? Listen to Yancheng's advice. Cut off all ties with this woman and stop interacting with her. You are the head of the Mu family. What awaits you is a bright future. There are so many outstanding women for you to choose from, so why did you choose this woman? If you ask me, I don't have the ability to compete with you. The Mu group has indeed developed rapidly in your hands. I also hope that you will continue to be the head of the household. I advise you not to be too blinded by women. His words were so fake that it sounded like he was loosening the reins only to grasp them better. Mu Yancheng wasn't stupid. He also had his own cleverness. He was certain that Wuxia wouldn't really cut off all ties with this woman. That was why he said that. Mu Shumin said coquettishly, "Yancheng, don't belittle yourself. In my opinion, you're better than your brother. Fortunately, you're obedient and sensible enough. You won't do anything that makes things difficult for us." Before Mu Yancheng could respond, Wuxia nodded with a smile and said, "Yes, she's obedient enough, so she can be manipulated by others, right?" The main hall suddenly fell silent. Awkwardness flashed across Mu Linfeng and Mu Shumin's faces without exception. The others also felt greatly embarrassed and lowered their heads, not knowing what to say. Wuxia continued, "I think that the patriarch you are looking forward to is not someone who is very capable, but he must be well-behaved, obedient, and know when to advance and retreat. Once he ascended to the top, he could also hand over his authority and be at the mercy of others. When it was time to retreat, he knew to make way. What you want is a puppet, not a helmsman, isn't that right?" "Brother, what nonsense are you talking about?" Mu Yancheng pretended to be aggrieved and retorted, "Don't deliberately distort the good intentions of the elders." His words had more or less saved some of the elders' faces. Chapter 21:12. Kind intentions? Wuxia's voice suddenly turned frosty. "Out of kindness, you've set up such a trap for me and collectively want to force me to abdicate? I can't accept such kindness. Yaja. You guys have been plotting this for a long time, haven't you? I can see that you guys have put in a lot of effort." Wuxia's handsome face tensed up. His eyes were filled with anger and ruthlessness. "Since you guys have decided to force me to step down, what other choice do I have? As for those crimes, there's no need to worry about the pretext." "Yaja." Mu Linfeng shouted coldly, "You still have a chance. Take this chance to cut ties with this woman. We won't treat this matter as if it never happened and acknowledge your position as the head of the family. This is the only way we can be sure that you have no ulterior motives and can continue to lead the family business." Mu Shumin added, "Yaja, listen to my advice. No one is forcing you to step down from your position. However, what you've done has indeed disappointed everyone. Take this chance to cut ties with this woman and we can treat today's matter as if it never happened. That's right. Quickly cut ties with this woman. Everyone denounced and gave their orders sternly. Amidst the commotion, Wuxia suddenly tilted his head slightly. The moment his gaze landed on Yunshirshi's face, his eyes became as gentle as water. He slowly raised his left hand and gently covered it with his right hand. His fingertips gently caressed the diamond ring on his ring finger. It was the ring Yu had given him during their engagement ceremony. He caressed it over and over again with a gentle gaze as if he was caressing a one-of-a-kind treasure. The reverse side of the ring was embedded with a 20-point diamond. It symbolized that love was in the heart. Yu and Xiao Yichen looked at his actions and felt inexplicably uneasy. Yu, especially, felt a little lost in the current situation. He did not know what his daddy would do. He vaguely recalled his daddy saying that he could give up the Mu group for his mommy's sake. Although his words sounded carefree, could he really do it? No man would be able to ignore the temptation of power and women and know how to choose between them. Was daddy really willing to give up the Mu empire and choose to be with mommy? To him, the Mu group was not just a symbol of power and benefits. That was the result of more than 10 years of hard work. Was he really willing to give it up? When the time came for him to make a choice, could he really make it? Yunshirsher bit her lip and lowered her head. She clutched her clothes tightly and couldn't bear to look any longer. At this moment, she suddenly lost her confidence. He really had no confidence. Especially at a time like this, she was really afraid. The next second, he slowly took off the engagement ring and threw it at her, wanting to cut all ties with her. Mu Xiumin and Mu Linfeng glared at him. At this moment, both of them were worried. Mu Linfeng hoped that Wuxia would continue to be in his position. He was willing to give this nephew, whom he had always thought highly of, another chance. However, Mu Xiumin hoped that he could support Mu Yanqing to be in his position. Amidst the suffocating atmosphere, Wuxia suddenly let out a relieved smile as his hand moved past his ring finger. Chapter 21:13. He took off the ring on his thumb, which symbolized the highest authority in the Mu family. Then, he turned around and threw it at Mu Linfeng expressionlessly. Smack! The ring slipped off his body and fell to the ground. Yunshirsher heard the strange noise and looked up in shock. She could not see clearly what ring it was on the ground, but when her gaze landed on Wuxia's ring finger again, the engagement ring was still there. It was just like his promise to her back then, he would be her whole world and would never leave her. He actually gave up his position as the head of the household for her? Yunshirsher's eyes widened. For a moment, her eyes were filled with sparkling tears. She was so touched that she choked on her sobs. Yu's initially stiff gaze softened. She looked at Xiao Yichen and gently held his hand. At that moment, the two little fellows' palms were already sweaty. The crowd was curious about Yunshirsher and the two little fellows' reactions. Perhaps these capitalists did not know what true love was. Hence, when they saw the tenderness in the mother and children's eyes after Wuxia gave up his position as the head of the household for her, they were rather puzzled. They were even surprised. Wuxia remained standing tall. The surroundings suddenly quieted down. Everyone was intimidated by the astonishing aura emanating from his body. His handsome and tall figure stood there like a tall mountain, looking down at everyone from a high vantage point. He suddenly said in a low voice, "I've long gotten sick of this game. Forgive me for not playing with you. If any of you like it, feel free to continue." Wuxia turned around and opened his palm to Yunshirsher. "Come, let's go home. Let's go home." These 4 words gave her great warmth. Yunshirsher smiled with tears in her eyes and gave her hand to him. Their hands were tightly clasped together. The diamond ring on their ring fingers reflected each other's brilliance. It was holy and beautiful. Wuxia carried Yu while Yunshirsher held Xiao Yichen's little hand. As he stood up, the chair made a scratching sound on the marble floor. It was as if sharp nails were scratching a blackboard. It made one's scalp tingle. He held her in his arms and strode away without any reluctance. His handsome back was cold and indifferent, and there was almost no emotion to be felt. Although he had been stripped of the title of the patriarch, he did not feel any sense of objection. This position was given up by him. He did not even turn his head. Sodium Salt was extremely arrogant, looking down on everyone. Even if he was in the midst of scornful or humiliating gazes, it was difficult to diminish his kingly aura. Mu Linfeng glared at his back, his heart filled with complicated emotions. Not everyone present was like Mu Shumin, who could not wait for him to let go of this burden. Many of them hoped that Mu Yaja would know how to make a choice and continue to be the head of the household. However, he left just like that. He did not want the honorable position of the head of the household just like that. He was so decisive and straightforward. There was almost no hesitation. Could it be that he really did not like it? What a surprise. Back then, in order to sit in this position, this fellow had put in a lot of effort and sacrificed a lot to force those outstanding people to retreat and sit in this position. Therefore, some people felt that their hearts were empty after he left. Chapter 21:14. Mu Yancheng? Was he really going to take over the position? If this lad could be even half as good as Mu Yaja, the crowd would not have such complicated feelings. Mu Linfeng could not help but call out, "Yaja." Mu Yaja's back paused. Yunshursher glanced at him, only to see him turn around expressionlessly. He sneered and said, "All these years in the Mu family, I've been cautious and did my best. Now that I've fallen to this state, I've saved your last bit of face. But don't forget that without me, the Mu family's empire will eventually become a wasteland. Today, I've walked out of this door. From this moment on, the survival of the Mu family no longer has anything to do with me. If the Mu family faces any difficulties in the future, don't crawl over to me with that pitiful face of yours." As soon as he finished speaking, his cold and oppressive gaze swept across everyone present. Finally, he retracted his gaze and left with Yunshursher in his arms without looking back. Such heartless words had undoubtedly forced Mu Linfeng's last attempt to persuade him to stay back into his stomach. Resolute and domineering, this was him. Mu Linfeng seemed to have lost all his strength as he slumped on the chair. No one knew whether he was feeling happy or worried at this moment. Mu Yaja had left. At this moment, the Mu family's empire could be considered to have collapsed. He had gathered so many people and set up a hongmen banquet, but it was never for such an outcome. At most, he wanted to threaten him. At least, even if Yunshursher had to be a concubine, he would be happy to see it happen. But it was definitely not for such an outcome. Mu Shumin could not feel happy anymore. Mu Yaja's ruthless words before he left were a huge blow to her. She actually started to worry. With his ruthless methods, he would definitely not give up after leaving the Mu family. He would definitely use some tricks to trip up the Mu family. This was not the outcome she wanted to see. She had originally thought that forcing him to abdicate would be an extremely difficult task. A man with a strong desire for control like him would hold on tightly to power and not let go. However, they did not expect that a man who would do anything in the business world, who would do anything and everything, would rise to the top despite all the criticism and doubts. He used absolutely ruthless methods and almost swept away thousands of soldiers. He changed all the people in Mu Group. His ambition, his methods, and his boldness still made people feel a lingering fear in their hearts even until now. Such a man, for a woman, actually let go just like that. Isn't this too unbelievable? Until now, everyone felt as if they were in a dream, and it was difficult for them to regain their senses. It was hard to imagine that the current Mu Group had already lost its leader. Just a moment ago, everything that had changed had been overturned with just a single thought. Mu Yancheng was obviously very excited. He looked around and saw that everyone was silent. He then glanced at Mu Shumin and Mu Linfeng, who appeared to be indifferent. Hence, he reminded her indirectly, "Aunt, since he has already stepped down from his position as the head of the household, then, next, it was time to announce the new head of the household." He was already itching to make a move, and his ambition was restless. He was just waiting for Mu Linfeng to wave his hand, and logically, he would be able to inherit the position of the head of the household in front of all the elders. Mu Shumin bit her lip and did not say a word. Mu Yancheng could not help but feel disappointed. What was she thinking? Hurry up and announce what's next. Didn't Auntie agree? Chapter 21:15. What was he thinking? Hurry up and announce the next step. Didn't they agree that once Mu Yaja abdicated, it would be his turn to take over? Mu Yancheng looked impatient. Seeing that Mu Shumin did not say anything, he turned to look at Mu Linfeng. "Second uncle, what should we do next?" Someone at the side reacted and immediately suggested, "That's right. Since Mu Yaja has abdicated, we should support a new candidate for the position of the family head." Following this person's suggestion, the others seemed to have recovered their spirits and continued, "Second brother, you have the most seniority. Before this, you should have found a new candidate for the family head." "That's right. I think second brother has a candidate in mind." "Look, isn't Yancheng the best candidate? I heard that second brother intends to support Yancheng to take over. This is a good choice." Mu Yancheng listened to the flattery and puffed out his chest with a smug look on his face. He was full of ambition and was just waiting for Mu Linfeng to give the order so that he could take over the family head in a grand manner. This was the moment that he had been dreaming of all this time. Mu Shumin also reacted and said, "Second brother, you decide on a candidate." Mu Linfeng, on the other hand, was feeling complicated and lost interest. He was still thinking about what had happened just now. No matter how he thought about it, he felt extremely regretful. This was not the outcome he wanted. Therefore, his attitude towards the suggestion of another family head was indifferent. He said indifferently, "We'll talk about the family head's decision another day. I'm a little tired today." Upon hearing this, Mu Yancheng instantly wilted. His morale was low, and he bit his lip indignantly. Needless to say, he felt so wronged. He cast a helpless gaze on Mu Shumin. He wanted to say something, but he did not, hinting with his eyes. Was there a need for another day? It was rare for everyone to gather here. Now that everyone was here, why not take advantage of the situation and support him to take over the family head? Originally, since Mu Yaja had said such harsh words, it could be said that he had severed all ties with the Mu family. Even if he regretted it, it was too late to salvage the situation now. Since such a proud and aloof man had said such harsh words, he would definitely not come back. On the Mu family side, no one would lower themselves to beg him to come back. Today's situation had already been decided. Next, the matter of choosing a new patriarch could be said to be imminent. But at this juncture, what was the point of hesitating? Mu Yancheng could not wait any longer. After all, there might be some unforeseen changes after tonight. If there were any changes and another Cheng Yaojin appeared, then all his efforts would be in vain. Would it not be all for someone else's benefit? One had to know that the news hadn't spread yet. If this news were to spread throughout the Mu Jia, his peers would be eyeing him like a tiger watching its prey. How could Mu Yancheng restrain himself? He might as well take advantage of this situation and go with the flow. Before this, Mu Yancheng couldn't wait any longer. Taking advantage of Mu Yaja's meeting, he sneaked into the CEO's office. Sitting on the chair that symbolized the highest position, his heart was burning hot. He stroked the mahogany desk and thought comfortably that in the future, this place would become his world. All this while, he had been thinking about this place for a long time. Once he sat on it, it was like sitting on a dragon's throne. He hoped that he would be able to fulfill his wish one day. Chapter 21:16. Give me some time to think about this matter carefully. We can't be rash about the succession of the family head. There's no rush. With that, Mu Linfeng slowly stood up and left with a worried expression, leaning on his cane. That day, when Mu Shumin came to him and mentioned this matter, Mu Linfeng actually disapproved of Mu Yancheng. Although Mu Shumin agreed and supported Mu Yancheng, in Mu Linfeng's eyes, it was just a woman's view. He did not think that Mu Yancheng was qualified to succeed the family head. He did not have the ability or the responsibility to take on the position. The reason why he gathered everyone and called Mu Yancheng over today was to use him to provoke Mu Yaja. He hoped to make Mu Yaja aware of the crisis and let him know that he was not the only one who could take on the position of the family head. He was originally sure that this kid, despite his fierce mouth, would be able to distinguish the pros and cons clearly and would not make a mistake. However, later on, Mu Linfeng realized that Yun Shishir occupied such an important position in his heart. He was wrong, ridiculously wrong. In just one night, his chances of winning were gone. Without Mu Yaja, half of the Mu group had indeed collapsed. This time, it was his turn to feel uncomfortable. This brat was quite carefree, wasn't he? He was sure that without him, the Mu group would be in chaos. Others did not understand, but Mu Linfeng knew very well that the Mu group was going to experience a bloodbath in the coming days. Sigh. What a miscalculation. After Mu Linfeng left, Mu Yancheng forced himself to remain calm on the surface, but inside, he was angry and anxious. He originally thought that it would be his turn to take over the family head, but Mu Linfeng left just like that. What was he? He had schemed and plotted for so long. In the end, there wouldn't be any changes, right? He keenly sensed that Mu Linfeng was not satisfied with him and was obviously unwilling to hand over the family head position to him. Then, who did he want to support? Could it be that all his hard work was for naught? When Mu Shumin saw him suppressing his dissatisfaction and forbearance, she, too, felt a little guilty, so she secretly consoled him. Your second uncle hasn't adjusted his mentality properly. Once tonight is over, I'll ask him again and see if he has any plans for the next step. This matter can't be rushed. Even if he announces today that he will support you, the position won't be stable and won't be stable. There's no need to rush. Mu Yancheng felt wronged. Second uncle doesn't approve of me? Or do you think that I'm not qualified and not as outstanding as second brother? Yancheng, don't let your thoughts run wild. Especially at a time like this, we can't afford to be flustered. Okay, aunt, I'll listen. Mu Yancheng took a step back and compromised. Mu Shumin smiled. After leaving the Mu residence, on the way home, Mu Yaja sat in the back seat with Yu Yu in his arms. However, he did not seem to be in a good mood. From the beginning to the end, he looked out of the window and remained silent. Yun Shishir's heart sank when she saw this. He was definitely not in a good mood tonight. It was not that he was reluctant to part with her, but after all, he was giving up so many years of hard work. Naturally, he felt uncomfortable. She slowly placed her hand on the back of his hand. Chapter 21:17. Are you very sad? She asked softly, looking a little guilty. After all, it was because of her that things had turned out this way. She couldn't help but feel guilty. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen looked at each other and kept quiet. Mu Yaja said in a low voice, "Don't let your imagination run wild. I don't feel upset." Even though he was comforting her, Yun Shishir still felt a little lost. Yu Yu suddenly said, "Daddy, you still have mommy. You still have Xiao Yichen and me. We are your strongest supporters." It didn't matter if he didn't say anything, but the moment he spoke, Yun Shishir suddenly reacted. She suddenly turned her gaze and stared at him. She said darkly, "Yu Yu, I think you should be honest with mommy." Yu Yu tilted his head and deliberately acted cute. He looked confused and his gaze was blank. "Mommy, what do you want me to explain? What's going on today?" "Today?" Yu Yu continued to act cute. He blinked his big, watery eyes as if he didn't understand her words. Yunshishir snorted coldly and reached out to pinch his ear. Wah! Yu cried out pitifully, Mommy. Mommy, let go. It hurts. Hurry up and tell me the truth. What do you mean by flattening Mu Corporation? Where did you get the confidence to say such bold words? Xiao Yichen said leisurely, Yu, hurry up and tell me the truth. Otherwise, you will die in Mommy's hands tonight. Yu immediately asked Mu Yaja for help. Daddy. Daddy. Help me. Mu Yaja ignored him and said airily, be good and tell me the truth. He wasn't going to clean up his own mess. Are you still thinking about asking for help? Yunshishir smiled and tightened her grip. Yu couldn't take it anymore. He said with tears in his eyes, Mommy. It hurts. Calm down and listen to my explanation. Okay. Yunshishir let go of him and crossed her arms elegantly. She smiled calmly and said, I'll give you a chance to explain. Sucking in a deep breath of cold air, Yu proceeded to explain his background in one breath. Of course, he omitted the background of the Hurricane Group. The reason why he avoided talking about this identity was because he didn't want to agitate her too much. Step by step. If he was too shaken, he was afraid that his mommy wouldn't be able to accept the truth. When he was 5 years old, he officially took over as the chief shareholder of Lizhi Holdings. When he became the CEO and appointed Li Hanlin as a special director, his net worth rose to more than 1 billion yuan. When Lizhi Holdings got listed, its market value was estimated to reach an unprecedented scale. After saying all this, Yu sighed. Although Lizhi Holdings may not be able to compete with the Mu Corporation, we won't let them do whatever they want to us. Mommy, I just want you to know that we are not that easy to bully. Yunshishir was dumbfounded when she heard this. She stared blankly and didn't come back to her senses for a long time. Lizhi Holdings? Lizhi Holdings. Wasn't that the world's #1 toy supplier? She had seen the news that Lizhi Holdings was going to be listed and it was reported on China Central News. She had always been passionate about Lizhi Holdings products. She bought most of the gifts for Yu and Xiao Yichen from Lizhi's flagship store. Chapter 21:18. What, 5 years old? 5 years old? Now, he was the legal representative of Lizhi and owned a considerable amount of shares. Was she dreaming? When Yu saw that Yunshishir was in a daze, he waved his hand curiously in front of her eyes. Mommy, what's wrong? Mu Yaja glanced at her from the corner of his eyes. He couldn't help but chuckle as he scratched her nose affectionately. Only then did she regain her senses. Still, she glanced at him in disbelief and muttered, I can't believe it. Yu patted her shoulder comfortingly and said meaningfully, Mommy, you have to believe that anything is possible. I can't believe that you're my biological son. Yunshishir muttered the second half of her sentence. Yu was dumbfounded. Yunshishir held Yu's little face in her hands and looked at him from left to right. Then, she recalled how high-spirited Yu was when he was at the Mu residence. He was arrogant, bold, and heroic. However, when she looked at the obedient and cute little boy in front of her, Yunshishir felt that the whole world was spinning. She couldn't believe it. Could she say that she didn't believe it? He dominated the toy market at 7 years old. He was only 7 years old. When she was 7 years old, she was still playing with mud with Xiao Jie. She couldn't believe that such a genius son had come from her womb. Wasn't there a saying called genetic mutation? Then why was Yu the only one who had a mutation, but Xiao Yichen, he couldn't even do basic arithmetic. No, Xiao Yichen was also very amazing. She had seen him carry a washing machine with her own eyes, yet, he was able to carry it on his shoulders with such a small body. What kind of crazy pair did she give birth to? Xiao Yichen looked at Yunshishir's stunned expression and laughed out loud. Ha ha ha. You scared Mommy. Ha ha ha. Yu said innocently, Mommy, I'm too smart. It's not my fault. Yunshishir tried her best to hold her head and closed her eyes tightly, signaling him to keep quiet. Baby, let mommy calm down. Mommy can't digest what you've said for a while. Yes. Yunshishir suddenly thought of something and asked suspiciously, the agent Li you're talking about? The one you always thought was the principal. Headmaster Li. Yunshishir's eyes widened. He's your director? Yu crossed her arms and nodded. I'm also your personal assistant. No wonder. She had always thought that Li Hanlin was the principal of the kindergarten and that he cared for Yu so much because he liked him. Yunshishir's heart was still pounding. There were times when Yu would often express his annoyance towards Li Hanlin, but Li Hanlin would not take it to heart. Instead, Li Hanlin would tremble with fear. At that time, she was already confused. Now that she thought about it, that was just a subordinate's way of showing his respect to his superior. There were times when she thought that Yu's attitude towards Li Hanlin was very arrogant, but Li Hanlin still acted exceptionally magnanimous. Now that she thought about it, it was all because he was afraid that Yu would deduct his bonus as a subordinate. It was no wonder. Had there ever been a principal who cared so much about a student whom he had never met before? This kind of love seemed to have gone beyond logic. Now that she thought about it, Yunshishir suddenly felt as though she had been kept in the dark from the beginning. Chapter 21:19. Yunshishir glared at him coldly. Suddenly, she pinched his face unhappily and said gloomily, "Boy, how dare you lie to me and say that he is the principal of the kindergarten? How dare you lie to mommy?" Ouch, 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 Yu hugged her hand and begged for mercy. "Mommy, please spare me. Mommy, I was wrong." Yunshishir pretended to be angry and said, "If it weren't for what happened today, I don't know when you would have come clean with me." Sob, sob, sob. "Mommy, I was wrong. Please spare me, okay?" Yu put his hands together and begged for mercy again and again. Xiao Yichen couldn't help but snicker. Pft, pft, pft. You made mommy angry. Who asked you to hide it from mommy? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly felt a somewhat cold gaze fall on him. Xiao Yichen slowly turned his eyes and saw Yunshishir looking at him coldly. She pursed her lips and said, "Oh. So you knew about it too? You hid it from me with Yu." Without waiting for little Yichen's explanation, Yunshishir's hand reached over and mercilessly pinched his little ear. Sob, 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 sob. "Mommy, let me go. What did I do wrong?" Xiao Yichen felt wronged and teared up. He felt that he had been implicated. Accomplice. "Mommy, I didn't hide it from you on purpose. Yu asked me to hide it from you and not tell you." Yunshishir looked at Yu and narrowed her eyes. Yu quickly begged for mercy and said, "That's because I didn't want mommy to worry." Yu broke free from her grip and held her hand instead. He placed his hand on the back of her hand and the grievance on his face suddenly disappeared. It was replaced by a dazzling tenderness. "Mommy, I know you're angry and worried. That's why I didn't dare to tell you the truth. No matter what my identity is, I'm still that sensible and obedient Yu by my mommy's side. That will never change. Mommy, I'm working hard to become stronger, by hook or by crook, at all costs. I just want to protect you better and not let you be bullied by anyone. I've had enough of being weak, helpless, isolated, and bullied. Although some of the memories happened when I was very young, they were still deeply etched in my mind. I don't want such a nightmare to accompany you for the rest of your life." His words were incomparably sincere. Yu looked at her gently. Suddenly, she reached out her little hand and grabbed Mu Yaja's hand. She replaced herself and gently placed her hand on the back of Yunshishir's hand. Then, he turned his head and exchanged a smile with Xiao Yichen. The two little fellows gently placed their little hands on her. "In the future, let's never be separated again, okay? Before you could finish speaking, Yunshirshi's face was already covered in tears. She tried her best not to show her weak side in front of the little munchkin. She widened her eyes and tried in vain to force back her tears. But she couldn't help it. These simple words were so touching. She couldn't hold back her tears any longer. Initially, when this little fellow fearfully confessed his identity to her, Yunshirsher didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She was obviously very angry, but she also felt a little heartache and helplessness. At the same time, she also felt a great sense of loss and defeat. So, Xiao Bao, who she had always doted on, was already such a formidable person. He was clearly still such a young child, but he was already able to hold up half the sky. And she, as his guardian, still relied on his protection at this crucial moment. Chapter 21:20. Yunshirsher did not feel good about it. Perhaps no mother would feel happy about this. Right now, her heart was filled with guilt, loneliness, and bitterness. With tears in her eyes, Yunshirsher hugged the two little munchkins and closed her eyes. From an angle where the two little munchkins could not see, she let her tears flow freely. She probably could not be considered a good mother. Mu Yaja's heart was also touched. There had never been a time when his heart was as hot as tonight. There had never been a time when he felt that the hearts of the four of them were so close. At this moment, he suddenly felt that he was like a tall mountain, towering and indestructible. Although he had stepped down as the head of the family, he did not regret it at all. He was no longer the person he used to be. Now, although he had lost the Mu group, he felt that he was strong and indestructible. He gently hugged the three of them and narrowed his eyes. Inadvertently, his gentle gaze was like the purest lake water, tender and moving. Tonight was destined to be a sleepless night. The Mu family's house was brightly lit. After Mu Linfeng left the banquet, Mu Shumin and Mu Yancheng left as well. However, the others did not leave. They sat down calmly and discussed the matter of the head of the family. Ever since Mu Yaja casually stepped down from his position, these elders and shareholders, who were initially gloating over the company's misfortune, became worried. Never would they have expected Mu Yaja to abdicate his responsibilities without looking back, all for the sake of a woman. This time, they were worried sick. Regarding the news of Mu Yaja stepping down as the head of the family, the next step was to launch a series of public relations. First, they had to issue an announcement letter to announce that Mu Yaja had stepped down as the CEO of Disheng Financial Group. Next, they would have to face the bombardment of the media. The public relations department would probably have to quickly set up an alert and do a good job of public relations. Then, when the news was released, they would have to think of ways to calm the unrest and uneasiness caused by the change of power in the headquarters. After all, any change in power in a company would usually be announced in advance to give a precaution. For example, before Mu Yaja became the CEO, Mu Yaja CEO, the headquarters of Mu Group issued an announcement 1 month in advance. Moreover, within this 1 month, all the handover work was carried out in an orderly manner. 1 month later, Mu Yaja took office. Even so, the Mu Group was still in an uproar. Firstly, Mu Yaja was only about 20 years old at that time. He was young and full of vigor. At that age, many men had yet to graduate from university, but he had already obtained a degree in finance. Moreover, with his overwhelming strength, he stood his ground against all opposition and ascended to the position of president. There were many people who were not convinced by him. Not to mention the veterans of Disheng's shareholders' meeting, even the ordinary employees at the headquarters shook their heads at the mention of this new president. Before Mu Yaja took over, Mu Sheng was the chairman and honorary CEO, while the deputy general manager was an external executive. However, all the power was still in his hands. With such a young face changing overnight, many people's hearts were pounding. They were afraid that the Mu Group would go downhill after the change. A generation's head, a generation's head. Chapter 21:21. Secondly, as the saying goes, a new broom sweeps clean. As soon as Mu Yaja took over, he set fire to the senior management. He kicked out a few good-for-nothings and cleaned up a few of the senior management who were idling around. He then supported new people to take over. That move caused panic among many people. During that period of time, the stock price of Mu Group was fluctuating. It fell again and again until it plunged by 4%. Don't underestimate that 4%. If it were any other company, they would have been on the verge of bankruptcy. Only a deep-rooted financial group like the Mu Group could barely stabilize the situation. However, just when everyone was worried about the future of Mu Group, Mu Yaja was invincible. Not only did he get rid of the hidden tumors in Mu Group, but he also issued new policies one after another. He carried out reforms swiftly and decisively. He bought up many potential bad assets. Under his operation, Mu Group quickly recovered and climbed to the top with an amazing momentum. How could people not be impressed by such a strategy? Everything felt like a dream. He was a peerless genius. Mu Yaja's business talent was definitely unique. However, now that they were back to this difficult time, the elders were worried. They did not even know how to explain it to the public. They did not even have to think about it. If they announced to the public that Mu Yaja was stepping down as the CEO, the stock price would definitely fall to the bottom. That would cause an immeasurable turmoil within the financial group. At the same time, who else could be the savior of Mu Group like Mu Yaja did in the past? In the entire Mu Group, they could not find another man with such talent and responsibility. As the saying went, the emperor would summon his ministers. However, all of this happened too suddenly. What they were more worried about was the fact that Mu Yaja had spouted such harsh words today. Given his means, there was no telling what kind of crazy things he would do after leaving the Mu family. He had been in Mu Group for so long. He knew every move of Mu Group like the back of his hand. In other words, it was not impossible for them to empty out Mu Group without anyone knowing. No one knew the operations of the consortium better than Mu Yaja. Moreover, Mu Yaja had nurtured a group of thousands of people in the Mu Group. Most of them were the cream of the crop from famous universities such as the United States and the United Kingdom. Once Mu Yaja left, this group of people would definitely leave with him. This was undoubtedly the loss of the Mu Group's left and right arms. They were loyal to him. Mu Yaja was right. Without him, the Mu family would truly be in ruins. They would have nothing left. They didn't even dare to imagine what kind of dark day the stock market would experience if Mu Group made an announcement the next day. It wasn't hard to imagine that hundreds of billions of dollars would evaporate. This is too sudden. What do you all think? What opinion can I have? I thought tonight was just a simple family meeting. I didn't expect it to turn out like this. What bad luck. Chapter 21-22. Yaja, that rascal. So many people are scrambling for the position of the family head, and he just threw it away like that. How carefree and unrestrained. Could it be that he really prefers the beauty over the power? Wealth, power, and wealth, he gave them up just like that. Doesn't he have any reluctance? Everyone sighed and shook their heads. One of them said helplessly, "There's no point in saying more now that things have come to this. We'll hold a shareholders' meeting at 7 a.m. tomorrow to discuss the next steps. Shifeng will follow up on everything." Understood, fifth uncle. The public relations department must be on high alert. We'll hire a senior public relations consultant to be in charge of all media matters. Yes, I'll make the arrangements right away. Also, the media and legal departments must be on high alert. We'll strictly curb the rumors online. If necessary, we'll use legal means. Yes, sir. Tonight was destined to be a sleepless night. Yu and Xiao Yichen returned home. While Yun Shishir was busy, Xiao Yichen pulled Yu aside and asked seriously, "Don't you intend to come clean with mommy? Haven't I already explained it to her?" Yu, on the other hand, was baffled. Xiao Yichen sighed. What about the Hurricane Group? About you and the Hurricane Group, the toys you designed for the Daoist project, and your involvement in the military and maritime matters, don't you intend to come clean with mommy? Yu Yu's expression suddenly turned solemn. He shook his head and said helplessly, I don't have the courage to do that. Are you worried that mommy will blame you? Yu Yu smiled weakly, looking a little tired. No. I'm worried that she'll be disappointed in me and think that I'm a bad kid who commits all kinds of evil. Xiao Yichen retorted in his heart, think. Isn't that the truth? Yu Yu was stunned. Then, his eyebrows twitched uncontrollably. Mu Yichen, is he deliberately sabotaging me? Xiao Yichen sighed as well. I also think that it's better for you to hide this from mommy for now. After all, she might not believe you if you tell her about it, and she'll worry about you. Unlike his usual white-eyed self, Xiao Yichen was surprisingly calm right now. He was thoughtful and considerate, he had considered all the things that Yu Yu was worried about. Even Yu Yu was taken aback by his brother's behavior. You, me? Are you Mu Yichen? Feeling suspicious, Yu Yu tore at the man's face. Tell me, who are you? I don't believe that you're that idiot. Ah, Mu Yichen grabbed his hand with a mournful look and said aggrievedly, I'm clearly analyzing the matter with you. Don't mess around. At this moment, Mu Yichen finally showed his responsibility and boldness as an older brother. Yu Yu snickered and said, You're finally acting like an older brother. Mu Yichen blushed and cleared his throat awkwardly. I'm your older brother. I couldn't tell. You're usually a punching bag. Mu Yichen rolled his eyes internally. Isn't that because you're always bullying me? I'm just giving in to you a little. Yu Yu suddenly stopped smiling and said calmly, Don't worry. I'll explain it to her when the time is right. It's just that I haven't thought of how to explain it to her yet. Shipping, smuggling, military munitions, war. Chapter 21-23. Just imagining mommy's expression, they all felt crazy. After receiving the news, Lu Jinyu and Jianghu quickly rushed to Xiangdi Walk. In the living room, Yun Shishir served tea and heard Lu Jinyu's shocked voice. Boss, are you determined to do this? Jianghu also said in disbelief, We're halfway through the plan. Now that boss has stepped down as the CEO, it may be a big challenge for the expansion of the Xingyu Corporation. Boss, you're crazy. As soon as he finished speaking, the two of them heard footsteps. They turned their heads and saw Yun Shishir holding the brewed tea, standing there in a daze, looking very uneasy. They looked at each other and immediately felt extremely guilty. They comforted her and said, Sister-in-law, don't think too much. We don't mean what you think. It's okay. Yun Shishir put the teacup on the table thoughtfully and was about to leave. Mu Yaja suddenly held her hand. Huh? She turned around blankly, only to see him smiling deeply and comforting her gently. Don't think too much, okay? Okay. Yun Shishir shook her head. Don't worry. You guys continue to talk. I'll go to the garden to trim the flowers. With that, she hurried to the back garden. Mu Yaja's smile disappeared. He turned around and glanced at them coldly with a dangerous gaze. Jianghu knew that he had said something wrong and bit his lip guiltily. What happened tonight was very sudden. I didn't have time to worry about it. The Mu Corporation can't tolerate me anymore. Or, some people with ulterior motives have long wanted to pull me down from this position. They haven't made a move on me because I'm still useful. Tonight, they arranged such a Hongmen banquet for me because some people with ulterior motives want to use a few seniors and shareholders to kick me out. As for the others, they just want to suppress my momentum. However, I've turned the tables on them and stepped down as the head of the family. They must be caught off guard and confused. Lu Jinyu immediately understood what Mu Yaja meant. As a matter of fact, Mu Linfeng had long harbored such thoughts. As a chess piece, he was naturally dissatisfied with the fact that the man had his own thoughts and opinions. He wholeheartedly wanted to find a suitable replacement for the patriarch's position. Perhaps, he had already secretly cultivated some strength. This old man had a good plan. He wanted to make use of Mu Yaja to strengthen the Mu group. In the end, he would kick Mu Yaja out of the game and support another successor. In that case, wouldn't he be doing all the work for someone else? As for Mu Shumin, her thoughts were much simpler. She just didn't like Mu Yaja and thought that it would be best to kick him out. Even if it was difficult to shake his position, it would be good to use this meeting to dampen his spirit. Mu Yaja could tell that Mu Yancheng had gained Mu Shumin's trust. Mu Shumin wholeheartedly wanted to support this fellow to take the patriarch's position. As for the others, some were purely there to watch the show, while others were dissatisfied with his various actions and wanted to suppress his momentum. However, he had already been defeated and stepped down as the family head in front of everyone. As a result, some people were happy while others were sad. Most of the people who were happy were Mu Yancheng and Mu Shumin. They originally thought that it would be difficult to get rid of this thorn in their flesh, but they did not expect him to take the initiative to step down. Chapter 21-24. The one who was worried was Mu Linfeng. He had yet to find an outstanding successor. Now that he suddenly announced his resignation, he was immediately caught off guard. He had always been the one running the Mu group. Now that he suddenly withdrew, there was no room for any mental preparation. No matter who came halfway, it would definitely be a mess. The more this happened, the more opportunities the Mu group had to take advantage of. He beat them at their own game and took advantage of the situation. It could be said that he was extremely ruthless. There was no way out or defense at all. In this way, they would be given many opportunities. Lu Jinyu was suddenly enlightened. When he thought about it, he was secretly amazed by Mu Yaja's shrewdness. Rather than shrewdness, it was better to say that he was scheming. He actually had such a shrewd foresight. But then again, as early as 3 years ago, he had devoted most of his energy to the Xingyu financial group. Since then, Big Boss had already been playing a very big game of chess. Poor Mu Yaja. Until now, he was still in the dark and was still delusional about making use of him. Unexpectedly, he had already been reduced to a chess piece in Mu Yaja's hands. Jianghu was also quite excited when he heard this. He was waiting for the next step to be bold and decisive. He was ready to take down the Mu group in one go. Mu Yaja held the teacup in his hand and smiled. The ambition and sharpness in his eyes were already indescribable. It was late at night. Unspoken had just made the bed when Mu Yaja pushed the door open and walked in after taking a shower. Hearing her busy voice, he quietly walked over and wrapped his arms around her waist from behind. He whispered into her ear, "What are you busy with?" Unspoken was so busy with the things at hand that she did not notice when he walked in at all. She was shocked. When she came back to her senses, she complained, "Make the bed. The weather is cold. The quilt used to be warm." Mu Yaja was not in the mood to listen to what she said. At this moment, he leaned over slightly and gently kissed her earlobe. They had not been intimate for many days, so he kissed her a little hurriedly. However, he was very focused and had no other thoughts. Unspoken laughed and pushed him away, but he was not in the mood to care. Instead, he kissed her deeper and deeper. He twisted her body and hugged her waist. The heat of his palm was transmitted from her waist to her waist. His big hand slowly reached under her clothes and explored. "Hey," Unspoken said coquettishly, "the two little guys haven't slept yet." She had originally promised to go to the two little guys' room and read them a bedtime story after she made the quilt. This was basically her homework before going to bed every night, and she never missed a beat. Mu Yaja, however, snorted in dissatisfaction. "Ignore them. I don't care. Are you going to coax them to sleep?" Unspoken was amused. She was half joking and half serious. It's fine as long as you coax me. When his words fell, it was so ambiguous that it made her heart immediately thump thump thump. When she pushed him away just now, she only let out a soft moan. He then unwillingly stuck to her, hugged her, and kissed her lips. Their lips were pressed tightly against hers. At an intimate distance, their eyelashes were entwined together. Their breaths were connected, and the tips of their noses were touching. The corners of his lips were curved as he kissed her without a second of delay. At first, it was just a light touch, but the more they kissed, the more uncontrollable it became. Chapter 21-25. He immediately smiled along with her. No matter when it was, as long as he saw her smile, no matter how tired or unhappy he was, it would all disappear. Under his gentle attacks, she also learned to be obedient and let him kiss her. In the end, she also learned to take the initiative. She wrapped her hands around his shoulders and hooked them around the back of his neck. She took the initiative to kiss his thin lips and gently traced the shape of his lips. Then she deepened her kiss and entwined her breath with his. Her initiative, however, made him feel incomparably comfortable. Under his many training sessions, her kissing skills had finally improved a little. At least, she was no longer as nervous as a zombie when she hugged and kissed him, not moving at all. At that time, he was displeased that this little woman was so passionate in all the kissing scenes in the movies, but when it came to him, she was like a wooden fish. Now that he thought about it, this was just a little woman's unique shyness. The more she was in front of the person she loved, the more shy she would be. She wouldn't even know where to place her hands. Unlike before, Xianxia was now like a cute puppy. She gently licked the tip of his tongue, pinched it, and coquettishly rolled it. Then, she dug her way out and bit his lips. She did not use too much strength, though. Instead, she was gentle and careful, as if she was licking a delicious patch. He was aroused by her kiss, and his body temperature gradually rose until it was boiling. The man reached out to take off her clothes. She took a shower for him first. She was wearing a bathrobe, and because she had turned on the floor heating, her two cute little feet were bare. As soon as he did this, she was startled. Xianxia blushed and said, "Hey. Is it okay that the door isn't locked?" Wuxia laughed and said, "It's okay. What's so important about it? What if the two little rascals come looking for me and the door isn't locked? What if they peek? That's good. It'll be good for them to observe." "Hey." Xianxia was angry and amused at the same time. "I didn't realize that you were so indecent before. They should know what's going on. Since you haven't been there for so long, they should have guessed what's going on. If they know what's good for them, they wouldn't dare to knock on the door." The more Wuxia spoke, the more husky and magnetic his voice became. He pressed the tip of her nose, and his tall body slowly moved closer to her body. The boiling heat in his eyes could no longer be concealed. He untied her clothes. She moaned a few times and actually cooperated. Her two small hands reached over and began to untie the knot he had tied. With a tug, the knot loosened, and the bathrobe slid down from her shoulders to her waist. She grabbed his collar and gently kissed his collarbone, all the way down. Finally, she stopped at his chest and buried her little face in his chest. Over there was his scorching heartbeat. Thump thump thump. It was sonorous and powerful. For some reason, that place was clearly not his sensitive spot, but when she kissed him like this, it actually made his heart feel incomparably soft. A nameless fire immediately rose up, and he really wanted to press her down on the bed, press her under his body, and fiercely take her. However, it was rare to see her take the initiative, so he couldn't bear to disturb her mood. He held it in, and allowed her to please him. The pleasure brought about by skin-to-skin contact was so soothing. He closed his eyes, snorted softly, and hugged her shoulders. Xianxia's movements paused, and she looked up at him in a daze. Her eyes were filled with infatuation, and her cheeks were as mesmerizing as if she had put on rouge. Chapter 21-26. That seductive look, from the tip of her eyes to every distinct eyelash, revealed a fatal seduction that could hook one's soul tightly. It caused his heart to stir. The moment he met her gaze, it was as if he had been electrocuted. The electric current instantly struck his waist and traveled along the nerves in his spine to his brain. This was probably the most mysterious charm between a man and a woman. Heaven created men and women at the same time. One was yang, one was yin. One was full of heroic spirit, while the other was charming and enchanting. The two bodies fit together perfectly. Every side of them fit perfectly. It was a pure and natural aesthetic. Her voice was extremely like a lazy cat. With just a mule, it made his heart go numb and unbearable. He suddenly smiled and pecked her lips, as if it was some kind of praise. With a good mood, he said a rare sweet sentence, "Do you know, right now, you are very charming?" Yunshirshi's heart was alarmed. This man was either usually like an ice block or, when he teased people, it made people's hearts beat like thunder. The two bodies were tightly pressed against each other. Naturally, a kind of fascinating feeling was produced. This kind of feeling was like an intoxicating wine. It was mellow and rich, but it was not strong at all. It made people feel dizzy after taking a sip. Intoxicated and unable to extricate themselves, they still wanted to take more. The man looked at her blushing little face and caught her little hand, slowly guiding her to the next step. After taking off her clothes, it was springtime. The two people were entangled together, sinking into the soft big bed. Mu Yaja pinched her waist and went deeper, taking her, wanting her. Tonight, he seemed to be especially passionate. He threw away the heavy work of the company and the annoying trifles, wholeheartedly sinking into her without any distractions. Without any distracting thoughts, he was completely focused and immersed in the intoxicating **********. Naturally, it was rare for him to be in such a good mood. He was not like before when he attacked the city. Instead, he was extremely gentle and quickly climbed to the clouds of pleasure. They made love with each other until midnight, when they stopped. After they were done, he hugged her and covered her with the blanket. Lowering his head, he saw her satisfied little face dyed red. She was nestled in his chest, her pair of jade legs overbearingly and greedily occupying his waist. She was lazy and did not want to move at all. The aftertaste of the deed lasted for a long time. Even each of his fingers slowly relaxed. This reminded him of a pet cat he had raised when he was young. Her current expression was exactly the same as that cat's. When he was young, on his birthday, his mother had given him an American shorthair cat. It was very clingy. Once he sat down, it would walk arrogantly and elegantly to his side, rubbing against him intimately. Then, it would jump and nestle in his arms. When his interest was piqued and he gently stroked it, this little kitten actually spread out its body and turned its belly towards him, allowing him to stroke it. Perhaps it felt satisfied, its two little paws were constantly stretched out, and its throat made a gulu-gulu sound, as if it was enjoying it, as if it was intimate, and it kept snuggling its little head into his embrace. At that time, he was very fond of this cat. After all, it was given to him by his mother, and he had always loved it dearly. That cat had once lived in the softest part of his heart. Chapter 21-27. However, one day, when he returned home, he didn't know which mischievous child in his family had played a prank on him. When he opened the door to his room, he saw the cat cruelly nailed to the windowsill. A very thick metal rod had pierced through its throat. At that time, he was stubborn and proud. Even though he was heartbroken, he didn't shed a single tear. He knew that this must be a prank by some child. Because of jealousy and hatred, the child had nowhere to vent, so he tortured his most beloved pet to death. He didn't cry and buried the cat quietly. It was probably from then on that he swore that he would become the strongest man and never let anyone bully him. Wuxia snapped out of his thoughts and hugged Unspoken even tighter. Unspoken was almost out of breath from his actions. She looked up and saw that his expression was a little strange. She asked uneasily, "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Wuxia said plainly. Unspoken was stunned for a moment. Suddenly, she frowned and said weakly, "You're always like this." You won't tell me what's on your mind when I ask." Wuxia's expression froze. Then, he slowly curved his lips and explained, "You remind me of a pet I had when I was young." "Pet?" Unspoken couldn't help but be surprised. "You had a pet?" I didn't expect. I thought you didn't have much love for small animals." Wuxia couldn't help but laugh. "Am I that cold?" "You are. At least, it seems like you are." Unspoken gave a very pertinent comment. She smiled and asked, "What kind of pet do you have? A dog? A snake?" Unspoken's mouth formed an O shape. Snake? Thinking about it carefully, it wasn't surprising. Snakes were cold-blooded animals. Just like the initial impression he gave people, he was cold and heartless. Wuxia immediately said, "I'm just scaring you. Compared to dogs, I prefer cats. They're quiet, obedient, and clingy. More importantly, they won't disturb me when I'm in a bad mood. Instead, they'll quietly accompany me." It wasn't that he hadn't raised a puppy before. At first, he liked it very much. But when he was young, he was too thoughtful and always liked to isolate himself in a small space. As for the dog, it seemed to be so enthusiastic that it was a little over the top. It ran around as if it had endless energy all over its body, jumping and jumping, full of vitality. He simply did not have the mental strength to deal with such enthusiasm. Therefore, he was more inclined towards cats. "You raised a cat?" "Yes, my mother gave it to me as a birthday present. I still remember its round head. It was very cute." Wuxia paused and added, "I like it very much." "What about now? Where's the cat?" Unspoken was a little curious. She had never seen him raise any pets. "Dead." "Dead?" Unspoken frowned and her heart sank. "Is it sick?" You might not know this, but in a family like the Mu family, even children of a few years old will be influenced by the family's scheming. Therefore, there will be wars. Wuxia narrowed his eyes and curled his lips. That cat was probably tortured to death by one of the children. Because of his identity as the legitimate son, he had many enemies. Many children saw him as a thorn in their side and a stumbling block. As for him, he didn't have any close peers. Chapter 21-28. Unspoken was terrified when she thought about it. Then, she was filled with righteous indignation. They're so young, but they're already so vicious. How could they abuse animals? It's horrible. The kitten is innocent. How could they be so cruel? Are their hearts made of iron? It's my fault. Wuxia clenched his fists. His eyes were cold. In this world, the weak are prey to the strong. The weak are meat, and the strong are food. If you're not strong enough, you're destined to be eaten alive. He lowered his gaze and stroked her head. He smiled gently. "But, I'll protect you." He would protect her, Yu, and Xiao Chen. He was never a man who loved power and fame. But all this, be it power or fame, was just to build a majestic city for his beloved princess. He was duty-bound to protect her. That was all. Compared to being a prince, he was more willing to be her knight. He would go through fire and water with no regrets. Unspoken hugged him tightly and smiled contentedly. Early the next morning, Mu Group was busy preparing for the event. The Public Relations Department boldly and decisively prepared a public relations draft to deal with the media, while the Legal Department and the Media Department worked together. Early in the morning, they held 7 to 8 emergency meetings of various sizes. As for the other members, they were also in a state of confusion during the regular meetings. The news of Mu Yaxia stepping down as the head of the family was not released for the time being. It was strictly forbidden to leak any news. The Mu group was not ready to face the storm yet. Therefore, the news of Mu Yaxia stepping down as the head of the family was still kept confidential. However, because Mu Yaxia was absent from the regular meeting in the morning, the entire company was in chaos. The elders and family members who had experienced what happened last night were very tight-lipped. Therefore, no one knew why Mu Yaxia did not appear in the company. Minyu, on the other hand, received the news from Mu Yaxia. Other than being surprised, he was more solemn. Mu Yaxia's departure from the Mu group had become permanent. There was no turning back. However, Mu Yaxia did not appear in the company. Instead, another uninvited guest suddenly broke into the headquarters building. Mu Yanqing tossed and turned all night, unable to fall asleep. He was nervous and uneasy. He was nervous and uneasy because Mu Linfeng did not announce the matter of the family head on the spot last night. Not only did everyone panic, but he also fell into a state of panic. He was afraid that a long delay might lead to trouble. He could tell that he wasn't the most powerful candidate in Mu Yaxia's mind. Mu Linfeng seemed to be very dissatisfied with him, so he didn't announce it on the spot because he couldn't accept Mu Yaxia's resignation. Secondly, Mu Yanqing didn't have that kind of responsibility and ability. However, a call from Mu Shumin woke him up in the middle of the night. She said, "Yanqing, don't worry. I'll do my best to help you become the head of the family." These words, however, made Mu Yanqing's state of mind turn from danger to peace, and he fell into extreme excitement. Therefore, he didn't sleep for the whole night. Early in the morning, he drove to the Mu group headquarters. He thought to himself that with Mu Shumin's strong support and Mu Linfeng's promise to him previously, he was definitely going to be the head of the household. Therefore, Mu Yanqing rushed over early in the morning, relying on his identity as the future CEO, to inspect the company's affairs. He took it as an opportunity to get used to his identity as the CEO in advance. Chapter 21-29. He was thinking that it was only a matter of time before he became the head of the family. Mu Yanqing went to the CEO's office in high spirits. He pushed the door open and was greeted by a cold and quiet room. The high-end decor, expensive office furniture, the genuine leather sofa that symbolized power and supremacy, and the expensive Angnan carpet under his feet. He looked at all of this ambitiously, and his heart was filled with longing and ambition. It was said that when Mu Yaxia took office, the furnishings in the office were too old. Moreover, because of the long history, the original wooden furniture was somewhat damaged. Therefore, he specially ordered people to renovate the office. The office appliances were all brand new and made of the highest quality materials. Such an elegant and honorable office, in the future, would belong to him. Mu Yanqing paced back and forth in the office. Rather than saying that he was visiting, it was better to say that he was adapting to his future work environment in advance. He sat on the genuine leather sofa for a while and fiddled with the tea set in boredom. Finally, he leisurely brewed a cup of Dahong Pao tea and took a big sip. Fragrant. It was really not an ordinary fragrance. This was the most authentic Dahong Pao tea. If it were in the past, he would probably only think about it. After all, big red packets were rare in the market. Those that could be bought were mostly artificially cultivated and could not be considered authentic Dahong Pao tea. The purest Dahong Pao tea grew on the cliffs of Wui Mountain. It was impossible for humans to go up to pick it. Every year, specially trained monkeys went up to pick it. The annual yield was at most 40 caddies. The 40 caddies of tea were all for auction and could not be bought in the market. On the day of Hong Kong's return, a big red packet was given as a precious gift to the governor. 1 gram of tea was worth 10,000 taels of gold. This was probably the most expensive tea in the world. The Mu group won 2 caddies of tea at the auction, which was more than 20 million. These tea leaves were used to entertain high-ranking VIPs. Mu Yancheng, on the other hand, enjoyed it for himself. Beautiful, beautiful. Mu Yancheng could not help but mutter in his heart, Mu Yaja really doesn't know how lucky he is. He has such a wonderful thing to enjoy, but he doesn't care about it. He finished a cup of tea and stood up again. Finally, he walked to the front of the desk. He looked up and glanced at the empty chair. However, this was the Mu group's dragon throne, which symbolized the highest authority. A greedy and excited smile appeared on Mu Yancheng's face. Then, with a greedy heart, he strode over and plopped himself down on the chair. The moment he sat down, his brows relaxed and he revealed a satisfied expression. Whether it was satisfaction, comfort, or pride, it was all expressed without words. This was a moment that he had yearned for a long time. Even though this moment couldn't be said to be very formal, just having fun like this made him feel incomparably comfortable. Sitting in this luxurious office, the passion in his heart could no longer be concealed. His burning gaze fell on the high-quality mahogany desk and he subconsciously reached out his hand. At that moment, he was so excited that his fingertips could not help but tremble. Mu Yancheng took a few deep breaths and finally calmed down the excitement in his heart. He touched the smooth surface of the desk. In fact, he had been longing for the desk, sofa, and every object in this office, even a small seal, for a long time. Chapter 2130. Mu Yancheng suddenly cleared his throat and adjusted his clothes. Then, he slowly leaned against the back of the chair. While he felt comfortable, his face revealed a proud and arrogant expression. Second brother, you finally have a day like this. Losing the top position in the Mu group must not be a good feeling, right? Huh. At that moment, he was like an ambitious prince who had snuck into the imperial palace and sat on the throne. That sense of superiority almost spontaneously arose from within him. Then, he imitated Mu Yaja's usual demeanor and pretended to be arrogant. He threw the stack of financial reports on the floor and immersed himself in the role of a CEO. He shouted angrily at the air, "Are you trying to fool me with these? Get out!" As soon as he finished speaking, he excitedly laughed at the top of his lungs. Damn it, this is so satisfying. Mu Yancheng suddenly stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window that had been wiped clean. He looked at the city streets expressionlessly. Standing on the highest floor of the Mu Group headquarters, he only needed to lower his head slightly to have a panoramic view of the entire city. From his angle, the traffic and the employees who walked into the building were like ants. It was as if they would die without a burial ground if they were crushed lightly. Freedom. That was his state of mind at that moment. In his heart, the impression that Mu Yaja gave others was that he was awe-inspiring and unapproachable. That was the feeling he wanted. He really wanted to sit in this position as soon as possible and let those who usually look down on him have their eyes opened. So what if he was a concubine's son? In the end, didn't he still get rid of the son of the first wife and sit on the throne? Mu Yancheng touched the surface of the table. His eyes were burning with passion. At the same time, he felt that the turbid air that had been suppressed in his chest for a long time was finally released with these two hearty laughs. This was probably the glory of being in a position of power. This was the charm of power and wealth. No one could stop it. Standing at the pinnacle of power, receiving the admiration and groveling of countless people, such a feeling was infatuated and yearned for. Only a man as aloof as Mu Yaja would be unmoved by her charm. However, he was already a thing of the past. As for him, he was from the future. Mu Yancheng's face split into a wide grin. However, if this grin were to fall into the eyes of others, it would appear especially sinister and terrifying. Suddenly, there was the sound of the door opening behind him. Vigilant, he turned around and saw Minyu walking in. He recognized him. He was Mu Yaja's personal assistant and could be considered his most important confidant. When Min Yu saw him, he was stunned for a moment before he asked suspiciously, "Young Master Yancheng, why are you here?" Without waiting for Mu Yancheng to answer, he immediately showed a hostile attitude. "This is the CEO's office. Without the CEO's permission, you are not allowed to set foot in here." Min Yu was like a loyal subject, trying his best to protect his master's territory with a firm attitude. "I'm not allowed to set foot in here?" Mu Yancheng laughed out loud as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. "Why can't I come in?" Chapter 2131. However, it seemed that he could not emulate Mu Yaja's boldness. In his opinion, he was just like a child who insisted on wearing an adult's suit. It was childish and ridiculous. A child's behavior could be considered as childlike. His behavior, on the other hand, was disgusting. "This is Chairman Mu's seat. You can't sit here." "Why should I?" Mu Yancheng smiled and asked in a deep voice, "Why can't I sit here?" Hearing this, Min Yu's brows furrowed. Because I'm not the chairman, so I don't have the right to sit here?" Mu Yancheng's lips curled into a mocking smile. His posture relaxed as he slowly said, "I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you, though. From now on, this will be my exclusive seat. Just based on this, you have no right to interfere with me, do you understand?" Min Yu sneered. What was this? Was this a show of strength? He was well aware of Mu Yaja's resignation as the head of the family. He also knew that, in the future, this place would become a vanity fair for others. However, he did not have the right to do so now. The official announcement of Chairman Mu's resignation had not been made yet, had it? At least for now, this office still belonged to Chairman Mu. Min Yu had been loyal to Mu Yaja all these years. Hence, when he saw another man shamelessly occupying this office, he quickly became hostile. Even though he knew that the man before him had a much higher status than him, he was not afraid at all. Mu Yancheng, on the other hand, had completely immersed himself in this role. He displayed the attitude of an emperor as he looked down at Min Yu condescendingly. Obviously, he did not think much of a small character like him. Seeing that Min Yu did not speak, as if he was holding back something, Mu Yancheng observed him for a while and then curled the corners of his lips. He remembered this fellow's name, Min Yu. He was said to be a very capable person. He was also Mu Yaja's personal assistant who had been by his side for the longest time. Mu Yaja placed a lot of emphasis on ability. Being able to stay by his side for so long, it was obvious to all that she was quite capable. Originally, he was thinking that when he ascended the throne, he would do what Mu Yaja did when Mu Yaja first took office. He would directly wipe out the remaining forces around Mu Yaja. However, if he were to get rid of these people as soon as he took office, he would appear to be narrow-minded. If he were to replace Mu Yaja's people as soon as he took office, he would appear to be heartless and cold. This would leave a bad impression on the company. Therefore, he decided to keep these people by his side for the time being and observe their performance. If they were outstanding enough and had potential, he would promote them for the time being. If they were not loyal enough, he would slowly find fault with them and then find an excuse to say that they were incompetent. This way, he would have a convincing reason to kick them out. Mu Yancheng was quite astute in this regard. With that thought in mind, Mu Yancheng threw an olive branch at Min Yu. "Your name is Min Yu, right?" "Yes." Min Yu's attitude was neither cold nor warm, which made Mu Yancheng feel particularly uncomfortable. This fellow is really refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit. I'm about to be promoted. At this time, he should hurry up and suck up to me. If he makes me feel better, I won't make things difficult for him. Chapter 2132. Speaking of which, it was true that the servant was like the master. Mu Yaja wore an arrogant face all day long. His subordinates were cold and did not seem to know how to read people's expressions. However, he still held it in and said with a fake smile, I see that you've stayed by second brother's side for so many years, so you should have some decent skills. If a talent like you works for me, you'll have a bright future ahead of you. Why don't you stay by my side after second brother retires as the CEO? If you perform well, I'll promote you. As long as you're loyal to me and work hard, I won't mistreat you. As for your salary, I'll double the amount second brother offered you. How about that? Mu Yancheng was best at winning over people's hearts. Mu Shumin was a classic example. After a few bowls of bewitching potion, he was inclined to his position. Mu Yancheng was full of confidence. Now that he had offered such generous conditions, no one would not be tempted. However, his tone was somewhat reserved, as if his acknowledgement was a great favor. It was as if he was sizing up a beggar. It was gentle, but it felt like he was giving alms, which made one uncomfortable. Mu Yancheng seemed to be certain that Min Yu would wholeheartedly rely on him. As the saying goes, a fine bird chooses a tree to nest in. His original master was in dire straits, so why didn't he choose a better career path? He was waiting for Min Yu to show his subservient and fawningly express his sincerity to him. However, Min Yu only smiled as if he did not care about the conditions he offered. He only said indifferently, "Young Master Yancheng, don't you think it's too early to say this? I don't think there's any agenda for you to take the position." Mu Yancheng immediately said, "Ha! What do you know? Now that second brother has retired, I'm the best candidate. If I dare to say such things to you, I naturally have the confidence to do so. Don't worry, your master is in dire straits now. There's no room for him to make a comeback. There's no need to think about betraying him. He's the one who abandoned you, so you don't have to feel guilty." After a pause, he opened his mouth and revealed his ambition. "What do you think?" "Nothing much." Min Yu smiled graciously, elegantly, and politely. Compared to Mu Yancheng's sinister smile, it was a world of difference. "Wherever President Mu goes, I'll follow. In this life, I'll only acknowledge him as my boss. As for what you said, I'm sorry, but I can't." "You," Mu Yancheng stared at him in surprise before bursting into laughter all of a sudden. "Min Yu, don't be silly. Second brother, from today onward, he's no longer the Mu's, from today onward, he's fallen from the top. He's to Mu to make a comeback in his life. To Mu, have, to say, to work to be, to, are. Mu. To, are." The smile on Min Yu's face did not waver at all. "The day President Mu officially retires is also the day I leave my post. Regardless of whether it's a mountain of swords or a sea of fire, I'll walk down this path with him." Chapter 2133. Mu Yancheng sprung up from his seat. "Stop right there." Min Yu's back view froze on the spot. Mu Yancheng was a little angry. How could this fellow be so ungrateful? He had intended to keep him around to give him face, but now, not only did he refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, he even dared to put on airs with him. He was not going to fall for this trick. If it were in the past, he would have kicked him away long ago. Now, however, he did not want to do so anymore. It was as if his desire to conquer had been aroused. Since this fellow insisted on not submitting to him, he wanted to tame him and make him obedient to be used by him. A man's desire to conquer was not only reflected on women. Thus, he took a few steps towards him and shouted out a price, 200,000. Min Yu slowly turned around and looked at him coldly. He was expressionless as if he were looking at an idiot. Mu Yancheng raised two fingers in a lofty manner, looking as arrogant as a savior. 200,000 yuan. I'll give you an annual salary of 200,000 yuan. You'll follow me. If you do well, I'll promote you first. You'll have a meteoric rise. You must know that I'm giving you this salary because I think highly of you. Other people may not get such treatment. Min Yu sneered inwardly, but he did not show it on his face. Soon, however, a look of contempt appeared on his face. This expression undoubtedly infuriated Mu Yancheng. He resisted the urge to curse him and then pretended to be straightforward as he raised his offer. 300,000 yuan. 300,000 yuan, this was not a small temptation. Min Yu could not be bothered with him and turned to leave. Mu Yancheng was anxious. Seeing that the other did not give him face, he cursed, "What a greedy dog. You're just like your master. 400,000 yuan is fine as long as you're loyal to me." Min Yu stopped in his tracks with his back facing him. As if he had heard the funniest joke, he suddenly laughed out loud. Mu Yancheng was confused and reprimanded impatiently, "What are you laughing at, 400,000? Min Yu turned around and sneered. "Young Master Yancheng, I see that you don't usually ask about the company's affairs, so you probably don't know, right? Chairman Mu gave me an annual salary of 1 million. Moreover, all the employees working in the headquarters, even if they were just a small secretary, were 1 in a million. Their salary would be at least 300,000 yuan. And as a member of the 1,000-person think tank, as a special assistant, my annual salary is at least 1 million. Not including bonuses and additional subsidies, the 400,000 you gave me, even if I was a little better, my monthly salary would be more than that. Moreover, if I want to be your assistant, even if you give me 10 million or 100 million, I might not be willing." "Ha! He was followed by endless mockery and ridicule. Mu Yancheng's face darkened. He felt extremely humiliated. He was completely overwhelmed. 1 million? A special assistant's annual salary was as high as 1 million yuan? Second brother is really bold. Just as he was exclaiming in amazement, Min Yu said coldly, "Young Master Yancheng, let me give you a piece of advice. With your little foresight, you'd better not make a fool of yourself here. Forgive me for being blunt, but so what if you become the Mu Group's chief executive? The Mu Group will only go downhill in your hands. Working for you will only lead to a bleak future. You." Mu Yancheng felt suffocated and could not swallow his anger. Chapter 2134. Mu Yancheng felt that he could not swallow his anger, so he retorted indignantly, "What you said is ridiculous. How can I not do what my second brother can do well? Just wait and see. I'll do better than him. I'll be even more outstanding." Min Yu replied indifferently, "Oh? Let's wait and see, then." When the time came, if the Mu Group encountered any crisis, it would not be like a stray dog, running to President Mu and begging for mercy. However, there's a condition: wait until you officially take over the position. Although it's very likely that you'll be the head of the family, it doesn't mean that you'll be the CEO. If you have extra time, why don't you think about how to broaden your horizons? These words were undoubtedly a great humiliation to Mu Yancheng. Men were all hot-tempered. Moreover, at Mu Yancheng's age, he was at the prime of his life. Moreover, with his status and identity, how could he allow a small character to humiliate and belittle him again and again? Upon hearing this, Mu Yancheng could not force himself to calm down. Instead, he dashed forward, grabbed Min Yu's shoulders, and angrily grabbed him by the collar. Raising his fist high, he looked as if he was going to punch the latter in the face. However, Min Yu was not afraid of his threat. Instead, his eyes widened. His fist was like the wind, but it stopped abruptly when it was less than a centimeter away from his eyes. Mu Yancheng was amazed by Min Yu's extraordinary courage. Seeing that his fist was about to land on him, he did not dodge and even glared at him with his eyes wide open. This made him even angrier. His chest heaved up and down, unable to quell his anger, but looking at Min Yu's resolute and disdainful eyes, it was as if he did not take him seriously at all. Mu Yancheng was enraged and roared at him like a madman. ****, I'm warning you, don't look at me like that. Who do you think you are to act so rashly in front of me? I'm warning you, once second brother's resignation is announced, I'll be taking over immediately. Do you know what this means? It means that I'll be in charge of this huge conglomerate from now on. Even though I haven't ascended yet, a lowly thing like you has no right to question me. Do you understand? Min Yu snorted coldly. Clearly, he didn't take him seriously at all. Just as Mu Yancheng was about to teach the arrogant brat a lesson, Mu Linfeng's furious voice was heard from the door. Yancheng, what are you doing? Mu Yancheng raised his head and saw Mu Linfeng, who happened to pass by the door, frowning in displeasure at this scene. Earlier, when Min Yu came in, he did not close the door tightly. When Mu Linfeng rushed to the meeting room, he passed by the office and saw the door ajar. He thought that Mu Yaja had returned to the company. As soon as he opened the door, he was disappointed to see this scene. So it's this kid. What was he doing here? He happily thought that Mu Yaja had thought it through and regretted it, so he returned to the company. However, when he opened the door and saw that it was him, he couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. When Mu Yancheng saw him, he immediately retracted his hand and stood to one side with a guilty conscience. The anger on his face faded instantly as he smiled at him. Second uncle. Min Yu also smiled politely at Mu Linfeng. His attitude was rather respectful. Chairman Mu. Chapter 2135. Min Yu nodded and walked away immediately. Just as Mu Yancheng was feeling uneasy, Mu Linfeng slowly walked in and scanned the office. Finally, his stern gaze landed on him. Why are you here? Mu Yancheng was at a loss for words. He hemmed and hawed, not knowing how to explain himself, but how could Mu Linfeng not tell that he was ambitious? Mu Linfeng silently scrutinized him for a long time, only to see him squirming and not knowing how to explain himself. He swept a glance across the office and saw the Dahong Pao tea that Mu Yancheng had just made. There were obvious signs of him sitting on the office chair and some of the reference books on the bookshelf being messily flipped through. It seemed that this lad had been here for a long time. He knew very well that Mu Yaja had always been a clean freak. Other than that, no one was usually allowed to enter this office. Other than dusting and cleaning, everything in the office was basically arranged by him. The reference books were neat and tidy, and when he was not around, the desk and chairs would be arranged neatly. He was puzzled for a moment before he instantly understood. After all, Mu Linfeng had been in power for a long time and had experienced the ways of the world. He had also come into contact with all kinds of people. Although he did not say that he had seen countless people, how could he not guess what was going on in Mu Yancheng's mind when he had watched him grow up? Whatever he was thinking in his heart, he could basically see through it with a single glance. At this moment, Mu Yaja had just stepped down from his position, yet this lad had rushed into the CEO's office in a hurry. Mu Yancheng was not complicated at all. Compared to Mu Yaja, he was much easier to deal with. He did not need to speculate too much to know what was going on in the latter's mind. His ambition could be said to be very clear. Did this fellow think that after Mu Yaja stepped down from his position, the CEO position of the Mu Group would naturally belong to him? Mu Linfeng did not bat an eyelid. He glared at him sternly and reprimanded him sternly. Yancheng, your second brother just stepped down from his position as the family head and CEO yesterday, yet you rushed into the CEO's office in such a hurry. With so many pairs of eyes watching, it's inevitable that people will gossip. I think you'd better restrain yourself a little. Otherwise, if word gets out, the people below will think that you forced your elder brother to abdicate. It won't be good for you in the future. Mu Yancheng froze on the spot when he heard his uncle's words. His eyes widened in surprise as he stared at his uncle, feeling that there was more to his words than met the eye. Was second uncle worried that his actions would have a negative impact on the company? What did this mean? This meant that second uncle had the intention to help him ascend the throne. Otherwise, what was there to worry about? It was obvious that he valued his status. That was why he had such thoughts and gave him a few pointers. Mu Yancheng, who did not know how to restrain himself, broke into a wide grin. Chapter 2136. Mu Yancheng's smile froze on his face. He did not know whether to laugh or cry as he stood there in a daze. He regained his senses at once and asked in a fluster, "Second uncle, what do you mean by that?" "The literal meaning. You're very smart, so you should be able to understand it." Mu Linfeng did not elaborate further, but his meaning was already expressed in his words. Mu Yancheng felt that his joy had turned into sorrow. His originally extremely excited mood was like a bucket of ice water pouring over his head, extinguishing his enthusiasm. His expression instantly became dispirited. He sighed and then excused himself. "Second uncle, your words are a little too hurtful. I admit that I'm indeed inferior to second brother in many aspects. I'm very clear about this in my heart. However, no one is outstanding at the beginning. Back then, when second brother was promoted, the entire Mu family was against it. It was you who stood your ground against everyone's opinions and supported second brother. Reality has proven that second brother did a good job in the end. This is undeniable. Perhaps I'm not as capable as second brother, but that's secondary. My loyalty to second uncle is something second brother can't compare to." "Second uncle, your words are too hurtful." Mu Linfeng's expression did not change much when he heard this. He only nodded and said, "Indeed, you're much more enthusiastic about us than that child, Yaja. I also believe in your loyalty to me, but it's not enough to rule a financial group. Capability comes first. Moreover, second uncle is already old, and can't help you much. Let's not talk about other things, just the company's connections are something that you rarely take care of. There's a lot of work to be done in the financial group. I'm worried that you won't be able to adapt in a short time. Your second brother did this very well, and no one can replace him. However, now that your second brother is gone, the company is in a mess. You're not familiar with the company's affairs at all. If you take over, you'll definitely be flustered and full of loopholes. That's what I'm worried about." Now that the financial group had lost its core leader, it was as if it had lost its emperor's rule. The board of directors was already in a mess. There was a saying that a country couldn't be without a ruler for a day. This was indeed the case. Mu Yancheng's face took a turn for the worse and turned ashen in an instant. His originally arrogant face turned ashen in an instant. Mu Linfeng had lifted him up to the clouds in an instant, and now, he had given him a severe blow by reprimanding him. Min Yu's mocking voice still echoed in her ears, sounding extremely sarcastic. He was so angry that his face turned red, but he didn't dare to say anything. Mu Linfeng sized him up. He knew that this nephew of his was not as capable as Yaja. Most importantly, he could not keep his composure. Look, it was only the first day of Yaja's resignation, but he had already rushed into the headquarters excitedly like a crown prince who was about to ascend the throne. His ambitious face really disappointed him. After Mu Yaja stepped down, who would be able to fill this position? He had been thinking about this problem for a long time. He didn't close his eyes the entire night because he was thinking about this problem. However, no matter how much he thought about it, he couldn't find a suitable candidate. Among the many candidates, Mu Yancheng was definitely not the most capable one. Chapter 2137. He had watched Mu Yancheng grow up. Just like Mu Yaja, he had also brought him up. Although he was not outstanding, he was, at the very least, absolutely loyal to him. As for the rest, he had no interest in them at all. He had learned from his mistakes. Having suffered enough at Mu Yaja's hands, he did not want to painstakingly nurture a talent only to end up being an ingrate. Mu Yancheng was the most suitable candidate in his heart for the time being, but he could not reveal his thoughts completely. Otherwise, this lad would inevitably become arrogant and complacent after being promoted to such a high position. Everything had to be done step by step. Hence, Mu Linfeng glanced at the disappointed Mu Yancheng at the side and suddenly said slowly, "Yesterday, your Aunt Shu Min and I talked about you. We talked for a long time on the phone. She approves of you and thinks that you're up to the task. There was not much joy on Mu Yancheng's face, though. What was the use of having Mu Shumin's approval? Mu Linfeng had the most power. If Mu Shumin approved of him and Mu Linfeng did not, wouldn't he be happy for nothing in the end? Mu Yancheng only hummed in acknowledgement, appearing somewhat indifferent. However, he heard Mu Linfeng continue. Although I think that you're not steady enough, lacking in capability, and lacking in maturity in the way you handle problems, I'm still considering such a matter on account of your loyalty. Hearing this, Mu Yancheng's eyes widened in joy as they lit up. Second uncle, you, Mu Linfeng continued. If you have the time, stay at home and sort out the organization's affairs. I'll send someone to send you the information when the time comes. Go back and get used to the organization's rhythm. Otherwise, if I support you now, you'll only become a joke. If you have the time to come to the company to mess around, you might as well learn how to be an excellent business manager. Yes, I understand. Mu Yancheng nodded. He hid his ecstasy in his heart and maintained a calm and steady demeanor on the surface. Mu Linfeng continued. As the successor, you'll naturally have to be inspected by all the shareholders. When the time comes, if you don't even know the company's internal affairs, won't you be a laughingstock and embarrass me? Second uncle, are you saying that you approve of Yancheng? Mu Yancheng was overjoyed. However, Mu Linfeng said, whether I approve of you or not is another matter. The key is your own performance. Mu Yancheng nodded, unable to contain his joy. Mu Linfeng replied, I have a meeting coming up. You can arrange it yourself. Yes. Mu Yancheng watched him leave. Halfway through, Mu Linfeng suddenly thought of something and turned to look at him. Mu Yancheng, who thought that something was about to happen, suddenly heard him say, I'm concerned that your foundation in the Mu family isn't stable yet. If I were to support you at this time, you might not be welcomed by others. After thinking for a while, she realized that you're not young anymore. It's time to consider getting married and having children. Therefore, I'm thinking of arranging a marriage for you. I don't know what you're thinking. If it were Mu Yaja, he would definitely reject her outright at this time. This brat had never obeyed anyone's arrangements. Ever since Yunshirsher appeared, he had become even more unruly. Chapter 2138. Hence, he immediately nodded and said, as expected of second uncle. You're so considerate of me. I'm honored. May I know which family's young mistress you found for me? I'd like to be mentally prepared. Mu Linfeng was silent for a moment before he suddenly narrowed his eyes. Do you know Lin Shuya from the Lin family? The Lin family. Mu Yancheng sucked in a breath of cold air and then nodded fiercely. The Lins are a prestigious family in the capital. Although they're not on par with the Muse in terms of seniority, their influence in the city is enough to be on par with the Muse. As for this Lin Shuya, I've only heard of her name and haven't met her yet. You'd better take care of yourself before we arrange to meet. Huh? Mu Yancheng was stunned. Mu Linfeng laughed. You can hide it from others, but you can't hide it from second uncle. Don't you have a few girlfriends outside? Before that, you'd better cut all ties with those messy women. Mu Yancheng was stunned. In the blink of an eye, Mu Linfeng had already left in a huff. When he came back to his senses, he broke out in a cold sweat. The Lins. If he could have a marriage alliance with the Lins, it would be a timely help to his ascension to the top. He must seize this opportunity. He sneered at the thought of Mu Yaja. He was not as foolish as Mu Yaja, who would not let go of Yunshirsher as if he had never seen a woman before in several lifetimes. What kind of woman did he not have in this world? Women, power, wealth. What did he not have after getting his hands on them? He was the only one who had abandoned power, family, and wealth to treat a woman like Yunshirsher like a treasure. It was truly incomprehensible and unbelievable. After all, as long as he became the head of the Mu family, he could do whatever he wanted. He could have whatever he wanted, and he could have any woman he wanted. Although the men of the Mu family had abandoned the traditions of the feudal society, they still had many women by their side. They had 3 wives and 4 concubines, and they never lacked mistresses. Most of them had red flags outside, while colorful flags would flutter outside. Naturally, other than those whose mother clans were excessively powerful, most of them played their own games. Some of the women who married into rich and powerful families had kept several gigolos outside, and their hearts were wild. However, most of the women who married into the Mu family already had status and status. They only needed to think about what kind of perfume was more stylish, what kind of branded bags were the most suitable for their status, and how to be a proper and elegant rich lady. As for her husband's affairs outside, she mostly turned a blind eye and turned a deaf ear to them. At this thought, he sat back in his chair and dialed a number. After ringing for a long time, a woman's sweet and gentle voice came through. Yancheng? Qingxue, are you free tonight? There is. The woman was overjoyed that he had taken the initiative to call her. She said shyly, I happen to have something to discuss with you. All right, let's talk when we meet. Okay. Where should we meet? I'll go to your house at 8 p.m. Okay, I'll wait for you. Chapter 2139. Meng Qingxue was 18 years old this year. She was a model. Her looks were standard, and she had a good figure unique to models. Her ample bosom was especially coveted by men, and she had a beauty that most actresses in the entertainment industry did not have. When she was 16 years old, Mu Yancheng met her at a private gathering and took a liking to her at first sight. Even heroes have a weakness for the charms of beautiful women. Men had no resistance to beautiful women. Moreover, Meng Qingxue was a rather outstanding stunner. More importantly, when he first met her, she was still an inexperienced student, so tender that he could pinch water out of her. Mu Yancheng preferred a pure and innocent style, so he took her in without any hesitation. To be precise, she was snatched by Mu Yancheng the moment she debuted. Mu Yancheng was her first man. Meng Qingxue was different from the average young model. She was not that ambitious. Perhaps it was because she was still young and immature. Unlike those overly shrewd young models who had a clear goal, Meng Qingxue still had a simple dream of love. She had always thought that he was just a rich second-generation heir with a good family background and a net worth of tens of millions. Therefore, she wholeheartedly wanted to be with him, get married, and have children with him. Hence, her career as a young model came to an abrupt end. Initially, when she agreed to be Mu Yancheng's woman, other than his series of passionate advances and sweet words, she also liked his handsome appearance and considerate personality. After dating for 3 days, she gave herself to him and became his woman. Of course, other than her, Mu Yancheng had also been with many other women. Some of them were with him before he met Meng Qingxue, and some of them were one-night stands when he was dating Meng Qingxue. Of course, there were also those whom he had a stable relationship with for a few months. However, Meng Qingxue could be considered to be the one he had the longest relationship with. It was mainly because Meng Qingxue had a high EQ and knew how to make him happy. When he was busy, she would not pester him endlessly. The only time she was willful was when Meng Qingxue found out that he had other women. She was so angry that she cried and threw a tantrum, demanding a reasonable explanation. At that time, the two had been together for 3 months. Meng Qingxue developed strong feelings for him, and Mu Yancheng, too, liked this obedient and lovely woman. Hence, he kept her by his side all this while. However, as a man, once the novelty of a woman wore off, he would not have much patience. When Meng Qingxue quarreled with him because of his unfaithfulness, he was ruthless to her for the first time. Chapter 2140. Meng Qingxue turned pale with fright. It was also at this time that Mu Yancheng revealed his identity to her. It was only then that she realized that the man she had been dating for 2 years was not Xiao Kai. He actually had such a noble background. However, Mu Yancheng's words were undoubtedly heartbreaking. Initially, she loved Mu Yancheng more than she relied on him for material things. However, now that he had said this, her heart was instantly crushed and she fell into a state of despair. It turned out that this man was not with her because he loved her. He said that he liked her. But what was the real reason? At the end of the day, did this man not love her the most? But speaking of which, wasn't this to be expected? Love could be cultivated. Humans were selfish creatures. Anyway, people would love themselves the most, so they would fall in love with someone who could satisfy their desires. From then on, Meng Qingxue kept telling herself to be indifferent to love. While she was still young, she should work hard to get what she wanted. But in the end, she could not let go. It had been 2 years. She was deeply in love with Mu Yancheng and could not bear to part with him. She really loved this man passionately. She clearly saw through his scumbag nature, but she seemed to have been bewitched and hypnotized. Like a moth flying into a flame, she threw herself wholeheartedly into his heart. Mu Yancheng usually had high expectations of her. He had a serious obsession with cleanliness when it came to his women. Therefore, he repeatedly ordered her not to mingle in the modeling industry, not to mingle with other men, not to show her face in public, and not to reveal his identity. In addition, Mu Yancheng did not like to be controlled by others. He warned her not to call him unless it was something important. When he remembered or wanted to see her, he would naturally call her. As for her living expenses, he took care of them single-handedly. He gave her a bank card and told her the password. Every month, if he was in a good mood, her living expenses would be hundreds of thousands. This hundreds of thousands did not include those branded jewelry, bags, lipstick, and perfume. Meng Qingxue deeply felt that after that incident, it seemed that the two of them were in a relationship. No matter how she looked at it, she was like a caged canary, being kept as a mistress. She was deeply disgusted with this feeling. She was different from other materialistic women. She didn't have any wishful thinking about climbing up the social ladder. Compared to being rich, she preferred to marry an ordinary man who loved her wholeheartedly. When she first stepped into the young model circle, it was only because her family was poor. In addition, she had such innate conditions and was blessed by God, so she stepped into the young model circle. In the beginning, she was completely ignorant of the ways of the world, but when she saw all kinds of cruel unspoken rules, she had the intention to retreat. It was then that she met Mu Yancheng. She thought that it was a fated encounter. After they started dating, she basically didn't have to worry about food and clothing. However, in her free time, she still insisted on doing some part-time jobs, eager to support herself. Furthermore, she worked hard to learn how to cook and do household chores. Initially, she only knew the basics, but now, she was striving for perfection. She dreamed of being a good wife after marrying Mu Yancheng. That would be her biggest career in life. At that time, Mu Yancheng was still amazed. Chapter 2141. She was not the first woman he had kept as a mistress. When he first stepped into society, he had kept a few innocent girls as his mistress. Not to mention knowing his identity, when those girls saw how generous he was with his money, which one of them did not pester him for branded clothes, bags, diamonds, and other luxury goods. Even when they broke up with him, they would be ambitious and ask for sky-high compensation and breakup fees. This woman, though, was really strange. Despite him transferring hundreds of thousands of yuan to her every month, she was still living in an ordinary apartment building. She was dressed plainly and did not wear any branded clothes or carry an expensive bag. He heard that she had taken 2 separate jobs. Out of curiosity, he checked the bank account he had given her. After deducting the basic expenses such as rent, utilities, food, and clothing, there was almost nothing left for her to spend on her monthly living expenses. This woman. She's so different. On second thought, Mu Yancheng snorted disdainfully. She's probably doing this on purpose to win my favor, right? Suppressing her own desires, pretending to be a girl who didn't love power and wealth, pretending to be a virtuous girl who took care of the family, to please him and desperately want his approval? Is that possible? He was going to marry into a big family in the future. His wife would either be from a prestigious family, a wealthy family, or a scholarly family. There was no way out for him and such an ordinary woman. He was only interested in her beauty, her youth, and her gentleness. Other than that, he couldn't find any other reason to marry her. When he got tired of her, he would leave and give her a sum of money to keep her quiet. That would be the greatest kindness and consideration he could give to this woman. At 8:00 in the evening, Mu Yanqing showed up at the entrance of her rented apartment. Fengshan International's apartment building had been around for 8 years. It was not too shabby, but compared to the high-end apartments he had originally found for her, it was definitely quite shabby. As he walked into the elevator, the lights on the ceiling flickered on and off. It felt like a scene from a horror movie. On the 18th floor, Mu Yanqing walked out of the elevator and reached the door. Just as he was about to knock on it, his hand suddenly paused. This time, he was prepared to have a showdown with her. No matter the cost, he must cut off all ties with her. She had been with him for 2 years, and it could be said that she had given her best youth to him. In that case, he was not such a heartless person. This time, he would also promise her some benefits. These benefits were enough for her to buy a decent apartment in the capital, a luxury car, and the capital to not have to worry about food and clothing for 10 years. He had always been generous towards women. Moreover, it had been 2 years. It wasn't like he didn't have any feelings for her at all. If he wanted to break it off just like that, he would really be a little reluctant. He was not so free and easy that he would be stingy to see her one last time and just walk away. At the thought of this, he gently knocked on the door. Soon, he heard footsteps coming from inside, followed by a woman's cautious voice. "Is it Yanqing?" He could hear the playfulness and anticipation in her voice, as well as a bit of vigilance. Chapter 2142. Therefore, she was very careful when dealing with strangers. However, when he heard such a gentle and joyful voice, Mu Yanqing's heart suddenly felt empty. Did she not know that he was here to have a showdown with her and break up with her? He hummed in acknowledgement. "Xianxia, it's me. Open the door." The door was quickly opened. As soon as he walked in and the door closed, Meng Xianxia threw herself into his arms, hooked her arms around the back of his neck, and kissed him on the lips. The kiss was so passionate and emotional that it infected Mu Yanqing instantly. He hugged her back and responded to her kiss. After the kiss, she snuggled into his arms and said in a slightly choked voice, "Yanqing, I miss you. I miss you so much." Her voice was filled with helplessness and attachment, so much so that Mu Yanqing, who was in a daze for a long time, actually wavered a little. He did not seem to want to break up with her completely. Through the cold phone call, he had originally planned this very well. When he entered and saw her, the first thing he should say was, "Let's break up." Then, he would settle the accounts and give her a sizable breakup fee. From then on, they would not owe each other anything. Along the way, he was very determined. The words that he had rehearsed more than 10 times were stuck in his throat at this moment. Perhaps it was because, unlike the cold phone call, they had just met. Her soft and warm body was pressed tightly against his chest. He did not even need to exert much effort to feel the warmth of her skin. Such intimate contact instantly evoked his longing for her. Therefore, some words were not so easy to say. He still wanted her. It seemed that he could only become a sentimental man when he was with her. He also couldn't figure out what this woman was capable of. There were several times when he was affectionate with her, and he actually thought that whether they were married or not, he would keep her by his side. Even if he did not have a status, she could always be by his side. However, now was not the time at all. At least, before he got married, he should immediately break up with this woman. Alas, his physical needs gradually overcame his rationality. He kissed her passionately as he stripped her of her clothes. Every part of his body was screaming for her. Meng Qingxue pushed him away shyly and said coquettishly, Yancheng, don't. I have something to tell you. What is it? Isn't it better to talk about it in bed? His ambiguous words made her heart skip a beat. Seeing that they were about to lose their position, Meng Qingxue immediately grabbed his hand. She used so much strength that the veins on the back of her hand almost popped out. He stared at her in surprise and stopped what he was doing. Frowning, he asked, Why? You don't? What he wanted was to at least spend some time with her before they broke up. It was the last time they made love. It wouldn't be too late to have a showdown with her after that. However, she seemed to be very resistant, and her face was full of reluctance. That's not like her. If it was in the past, she would be as passionate as fire at this moment. But now, he didn't seem to be in high spirits. What is it? Mu Yancheng stared at her. You seem to be very resistant to me today. It's not that. Meng Qingxue's face grew hotter. I have something to tell you. What is it? Chapter 2143. Yancheng, Meng Qingxue bit her lower lip in a dilemma and then said shyly, I'm pregnant. I'm pregnant, Mu Yancheng was stunned. He. Yunshusher, I'm pregnant. At the same time, in a cafe in the city center, Song Enya was sitting in front of Yunshusher with a smug look on her face. She was as proud as a victor as she announced to her with a smile, I'm pregnant with Brother Mu's child. Yunshusher looked at her expressionlessly. Song Enya's cruel words were like a curse that nailed her to the cross in an instant. After Song Enya's words, she instantly felt that the whole world had turned gray. Just a few hours ago, she was woken up by an unknown number. She was taking an afternoon nap, but when she was awakened by the urgent ringtone of her phone, she glanced at the screen and saw that it was a number that she had never dialed before. She picked up the call suspiciously and heard Song Enya's cold voice on the other end. Yunshusher. Yunshusher immediately woke up from her drowsiness. Song Enya? She could tell at once that the Missy's voice was arrogant, contemptuous, and hostile. There was also an inexplicable sense of smugness in it. Yunshusher sat up on the bed at once, her face turning frosty in an instant. Song Enya, I heard that you went missing. Could it be that you've absconded because of your guilty conscience? Yunshusher, I have something to announce to you. Song Enya was not in the mood to care about her ridicule. Instead, she issued a challenge to her. 8:00 tonight at Queen Cafe in the city center. Be there or be square. With that, she hung up the phone without any explanation. I wonder what tricks she's up to this time. Yunshusher did not want to pay much attention to it at first, but at 7:00 in the evening, she was curious about what important thing Song Enya had to announce to her. Looking at the date on the wall, she felt restless. She thought that since Song Enya had asked to meet her in the city center, there was no need to worry about what tricks she would play. Besides, she had a score to settle with her. Mu Yaja went out early in the morning, saying that he had to discuss some important matters with a few of his men. It was already 7:00, but he was not home. It seemed that he would not be back for dinner. Hence, Yunshusher gave the two Xiaobaos a few reminders and hurriedly left. By the time she reached the cafe, Song Enya was already there and had sent her the name of a private room. When the waiter led her to the private room and pushed open the door, she saw a face that she had not seen in a long time. Yunshusher, you're here. Surprisingly, the Missy's face did not show much hostility when she saw her, which was rather unusual. If it was in the past, the moment he saw her, he would definitely gnash his teeth in hatred. His eyes would be as sharp as a poisonous snake, as if he couldn't wait to swallow her alive. It was different today, though. She smiled elegantly. Her eyes were clear, and her makeup was light. Unlike the heavy makeup she used to wear, her watery eyes and pink lips made her look very simple and elegant, but she was very charming. Song Enya was sitting at a table. When she saw her, she politely pointed to a seat and invited her to take a seat. This made her even more suspicious. Chapter 2144. However, the friendliness that Song Enya displayed on the surface made her seem like a completely different person. If it were not for that familiar face, she would really suspect that the woman in front of her was not Song Enya herself. Have a seat. Xianxia did not stand on ceremony as she walked over and sat down opposite her. You asked me to come here this time because, what would you like to drink? Song Enya asked as she flipped through the menu. Xianxia's expression froze for a moment before she said, a glass of Blue Mountain. Song Enya turned her head and immediately ordered, a glass of Blue Mountain. The waiter nodded and then respectfully left the room. At this point, the private room fell into dead silence. As Song Enya stirred the warm milk, the rich fragrance of milk immediately filled the room. The two of them sat quietly in silence. Xianxia sized her up silently. She did not know what she was up to at this moment, but she had a feeling that she had ulterior motives for inviting her here. This woman was extremely vicious. As the saying went, one's appearance was born from one's heart. In the past, she did not think that this saying made much sense, but it was vividly reflected in Song Enya. Thinking back to the past, her incomparably mean face gave people a feeling of disgust. Xianxia was silent for a moment. Just as she was about to speak to break the silence, Song Enya, who was sitting opposite her, broke the silence first. She raised her head and looked at her like a victor. She blatantly announced to her, do you know? I'm pregnant. In the apartment, the atmosphere froze for a long time. Mu Yancheng looked at Meng Qingxue in disbelief, his eyes full of shock and bewilderment. Seeing his stunned expression, Meng Qingxue mistakenly thought that he was shocked because he could not face such a big surprise. Her face became even more shy, as if she had put on rouge and was boiling hot. She pouted and buried her face in his chest, asking in a coquettish tone, Yancheng, are you unhappy? You're going to be a father soon. Perhaps it was because she was pregnant, but even though she was only 18 years old, the maternal instinct in her heart was already spreading because of the birth of a new life. Her face became softer than ever, and there was a holy and enchanting radiance about her. However, this kind of radiance was undoubtedly too dazzling to the point that it fiercely stung his eyes. For a moment, Mu Yancheng forgot to express his thoughts as he lowered his head and sized her up in a daze. Finally, his gaze landed on her still flat stomach. He was going to be a father soon, she was pregnant, how could this be? She even asked him if he was happy. How could he be happy? Right now, Meng Qingxue's joy and excitement formed a sharp contrast with his stunned and lifeless expression. Perhaps Meng Qingxue was too happy and immersed in the beautiful fantasy of the future, so she didn't care about his pale face at the moment. She pulled him to sit down on the sofa. Like a happy bird, she chattered to him, telling him the uneasiness and tension of being a mother for the first time, as well as her expectations and dreams for the arrival of the child in her belly. Chapter 2145. After all, Meng Qingxue was still young and did not understand what was wrong with her body. Hence, she hurriedly searched for relevant information on the internet and concluded that she might be pregnant. Meng Qingxue was nervous and uneasy. She went to the maternal and child health hospital for a series of checkups and finally got the result that she was 4 weeks pregnant. She was not prepared for the arrival of this child at all. That was because she was still so young, only 18 years old. Most girls of this age were still studying in school. Although she dropped out of school early because of her poor family background and entered society, she was only 18 years old after all. She was not mentally prepared at all. When the doctor saw her age and carefully asked where the child came from and if there was a need to abort it, she subconsciously refused. It was probably at that time when she saw the small shadow in the ultrasound that her maternal instincts could not help but stimulate her desire to protect her child. She used to hate children. Rather than saying that she hated them, it was more accurate to say that she rejected them. However, once she realized that she was about to become a mother, the joy she felt was indescribable. That was because she loved this man deeply, and the child in her stomach was their flesh and blood. Love the house, love the crow, and love for this child came from the bottom of her heart. She struggled with her thoughts for an entire night. She originally wanted to call him and ask for his opinion, but she remembered that he had said not to call and disturb his life unless it was especially important. After hesitating for a while, she put down her phone and finally decided to keep this a secret for the time being. It would not be too late to announce this to him when he arrived. It took her a few nights to adjust her state of mind. Meng Qingxue hugged him happily and said a lot of things excitedly. For example, she felt that her mentality had changed after she became pregnant. She also told him about her fantasies about the future. For example, after the child was born, she hoped that it would be a beautiful boy. However, if it looked like him, it would be good to give birth to a beautiful little princess. The customs in her hometown were used to favoring boys over girls. Meng Qingxue had experienced the persecution brought about by favoring boys over girls. Therefore, in her heart, she would like both boys and girls. After all, this was his child. Finally, she leaned on his shoulder and suggested an idea. "Yancheng, why don't we get married?" Although she hadn't reached the legal age yet, in her hometown, many girls got married and